Okay, welcome everyone to the Infrastructure Committee today. Hope everyone can hear us. We have some members in the room, some members online. I'll give you a brief overview of the day's business, which will be to receive oral evidence from Northern Ireland Water on the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill, to receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on final budget decisions for 25-26 and the Spending Review Budget Sustainability Plan, to consider the committee's draft end of session report 24-25, consider a written briefing from Assembly Research Information Service on Sustainable Drainage, also known as SUDS, and consider one SR subject to Assembly proceedings. I want to welcome anyone in the public gallery. Use of mobile devices through Wi-Fi is allowed, but no recordings or photographs are to be taken. So item one is apologies. Does anyone have any apologies? I note one here from Peter. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Item two is declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration that they want to make? So I have been informed by the Clerk of Standards that I should declare, and I think I have previously, that I have a brother-in-law who works for DFI, but I've been assured by the Clerk that declaring that once is enough. I've declared it twice, so that is a declaration of interest I want to put on the record, but won't be repeating at every committee, which I'm sure members will be glad to know. That takes us on to Chairperson's business. A couple of items here. I had a meeting with the Minister on Monday, which was very useful, probably an introductory meeting for me, and we shared more about how we would be approaching the committee and certainly positive engagement with the Minister regarding a couple of issues. Just to inform members that there are two matters in relation to the water, sustainable drainage and flood management issue, and just to seek committee agreement to write to all statutory committees to ask if they have any views on the bill, and also to publish responses to the call for evidence. We have two options here. I have a preferred one, which I'll outline in a minute, but we have, in terms of that call for evidence, we can either A, publish individual responses as they are received following consideration by the committee, or B, publish responses together after the closing date of the call for evidence. My view would be that we just publish responses as they are received following committee consideration rather than holding them all, but I'm happy to take the view of the committee on that. All right.
Sure, I take it you would be publishing them right away, but then that would still happen later on as well. It's not an either or.
Yeah. So yeah. What we're sort of considering here is, once we get evidence in, the committee will consider it in the first instance. Once the committee's considered it, we can put it onto the website and upload it, or we can hold it all and put it all on at once at the end. I'm happy to take any views.
Sort of agree with yourself, Chair, that as you do it as you go along, it allows people to reflect on it, and if this is a scrutiny committee, then it probably allows for more scrutiny. So therefore, but first time I've done this, so I don't know, but it seems a sensible approach.
I would say so. I think, look, just for transparency purposes, I think it's better that people sort of see the evidence, and I agree with you, Andrew. It allows for more scrutiny of the bill and people to come in. Unless anyone has any other views on that, are we content then to publish individual responses as they are received following consideration by the committee? Okay, brilliant. Okay, next item of Chair's business is a billboard in Newry. This item was flagged up to me on Monday, and then media, Stephen Nolan picked it up yesterday, and it was highlighted in a very sizable piece which I listened to last night. And essentially, this is a billboard at Egyptian Arch in Newry on DFI land, and I think, as far as I'm aware, it is the billboard's owned by Sinn Féin. So I don't want this to get more political than it needs to be in terms of our debate here. I've given this consideration, and in my view, this meets my criteria for scrutiny by this committee, and it does so in two ways. The first is that essentially we are all aware that, and certainly from answers that I've seen in terms of the media reporting, that there's no doubt that the Minister is aware of this billboard. The Minister has governmental responsibility for enforcing this and planning, and she also happens to be a member of the party that put it up. And so I'm concerned that there's a bit of conflict there. I'm also concerned, as probably other members might be, that when we have enforcement cases of our own as MLAs, and constituents come to us and ask us to represent them, how can we do that honestly and transparently when they could cite this case and say, look, there's a billboard, and nothing's been done about that. So I have a couple of questions regarding this, and my view is that we, in the first instance, write to the Minister about it. I'm going to open this up and let people give their views on it as any actions that they want. But I guess from my perspective, I'd like to know why there has been no enforcement or instruction from DFI on the matter. And is it the department's position that it's okay to put a commercial sign up anywhere in DFI land? Because that would seem to be where we are at the minute. And I'd also like to know what the department would say to our constituents who've been subject to planning enforcement when they realise the context of this particular case. I am happy to let members share their views on it if they have any. Yeah, Justin, Justin just joined us. Justin, we're discussing as part of Chair's business the billboard at Egyptian Arch in Newry's Camlock Road, which features a particular slogan, and I have included it in Chair's business because I think it meets the scrutiny criteria that this committee should have in terms of this being, I know I'm going over this again, but I'll do it for the benefit of Justin as it is in his constituency, that there hasn't been any enforcement on this issue by DFI, that the Minister is responsible for that, and the Minister is also a member of the party who put the sign up, in summary. And just wider than that, my concern is that if nothing happens in this case, how on earth do we as individual constituency MLAs deal with these enforcement cases when something like this actually occurs? So, as I said, look, I'm happy to take views on this. I'm happy to take actions if any are relevant. I've suggested that we do write to the Minister asking those questions, but I'll take any other views.
Sure.
Harry.
Well, I mean, it's been drawn to your attention, Chair, so suppose you suggest first instance write to the Minister for clarification, so I think that's a fair enough proposal. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
Chair, just I suppose it just in your opening remarks, it was not to become a football per se, and that's 100%. So I'm just wondering what the context of the letter is going to be. Is it going to be a general letter about DFI land and the placing of whatever it may be on DFI property, and sort of clarification on that? I mean, again, I certainly have no problem, again, as a colleague of someone who's got a private member's bill on the placing of such like on DFI property. I certainly see no problem, but again, it's just the context of how it's going to be approached, I suppose. Yeah. Much like yourself not wanting it to turn it into, said, football. Yeah.
So, look, my view on that would be we keep it nice and tight to this issue, and we don't widen it out, because I think the issue is what it is. I think we want to get some clarity as to how long. I mean, for example, we want to ask questions: when did it go up? How long has it been there? When did DFI become aware of it? Those sort of things. From what I've noted, DFI, when there was no government asked the party to remove the billboard in August 23, but I don't know how long it's been there. The fact of the matter, it is there, it remains, and I suppose the issue is, will the minister take some action on this, given the fact it's, my understanding is it probably doesn't have any planning. I don't know the answers to this, but does it have planning permission? I suspect not. Does it have retrospective planning permission? Is it therefore contrary to, planning law? But my view would be to keep it very tight and keep it to this, because, Justin.
Sure, there are multiple facets to this, and firstly I say very strongly that I support wholeheartedly the message on the billboard.
I can imagine,
the United
Justin.
Ireland
Yes.
is for all. Sinn Féin have removed their logo from the billboard. The billboard was erected during COVID. Question to the Ministry has to be, was suitable permissions sought before commencing construction works in the vicinity of a railway line, the main railway line on the side between Dublin and Belfast? There has been enforcement served. Sinn Féin are ignoring that enforcement. There are issues around rights and advertising rights, and what's the loss in revenue to the department by not getting the advertising rights from that billboard? There's major conflict of interests issues in relation to the minister and the main party of government, the lead party of government, whose minister is the responsible minister. Her party are choosing to ignore the law. It's a nice, convenient position to occupy, and it makes a farce out of this committee, makes a farce out of the department, makes a farce out of this part of the island. Are we a banana republic, or what is going on? Obviously, the breach of planning control, legal and regularity considerations. I can go on and on here. There is a major precedence issue. DUP folks, work away, put one up at a major gateway point to Belfast. You can't complain, but if you do that, how can Sinn Féin, the lead party of government, have any right to complain? All of the little enforcement issues that people are tortured on in relation to the windows in the wrong place, they put the lamppost in the wrong place, their extension has too high of a roof to pitch too tall. All of those that were enforcement is really heavy-handed. People on the ground, signage in businesses in Uri where they've been slapped with £2,000 fines for their sign not performing. And meanwhile, the lead party of government, the party responsible for mostly enforcing the law, they can do what they like. One law for thee, another law for me. Doesn't really ring true. So road safety, there's also an issue there. Has there been a proper structural assessment on the road safety of this billboard? Governance and ethical considerations, abuse of power, conflict of interest, big time. So there's standards of public life. There's so many facets to this, and come on here, Minister, what's going on?
Okay, thank you, Justin. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't disagree with anything that's been said so far. There is a precedent for dealing with this, and I've been contacted by businesses who have put up signs in the past, and they have not only been confiscated but ultimately fined for doing it in a much shorter time frame than this has taken. As the previous speaker said, this has been going on since COVID. The previous Minister for Infrastructure, Minister O'Dowd, contacted the organisation that had put up the sign in Sinn Féin and instructed them to take it down. He has identified in a letter to my colleague that the sign breaches Article 87 of the Roads Order 1993, which gives the department power to remove and to instruct removal. That was in April or May of 2024. We are now over a year on. The sign is still there. Instruction has been given. It is totally unacceptable. I agree with you. I don't want to make it a massive football today, but I cannot get my head around how a full department, with the minister in charge being colleagues with those that have ultimately put the sign up, have not in all this time been able to get it down. It is disgraceful. It needs sorted, and it needs sorted now.
Does anyone else have any comments on this? I'm happy to tie it together there. Look, clerks have been taking notes, and this is an item that I think we do need answers on. So our committee agreed along the lines that have been mentioned this morning, that we do write to the Minister and ask for some clarity around the points that have been raised. Committee agreed?
Yes.
Michael?
Can I just recap those, Chair, if that's okay?
Sure.
So write to the Minister for clarification on the subject of the billboard at Egyptian Arch in Newry. It is to make the Minister aware that the department has responsibility for enforcement, and also this sets a precedent, the committee feels.
Yep.
And to ask, when did the sign go up? When was it notified to the department and to the Minister? Did it receive any planning permissions in order to do so? When was enforcement served to remove the sign?
Who? And to who?
And to whom? Yeah. There was a point about advertising rights and revenue, to ask whether there are
Lost to
any
Department and Revenue.
cost to the department. of
Lost.
Revenue.
Lost.
Oh, lost. Okay. And we covered. Yeah. What is it? A breach of planning regulations? Yes.
One more point was consent sought before construction close to a railway line, the main railway line in this island.
Was consent sought?
Deputy Chair?
I'm happy to add it as a personal question myself, but if it might add to it, what other enforcement cases have taken place in similar instances, and how long have those taken?
And one finally from the Chair, what does the Minister intend to do about this case?
Members agree.
Andrew?
Yeah, just to, not to add or to take away anything, but again, I think this is a pertinent point, but I think I'm going much to the broader issue here. You know what I mean? That that we are going to, this will raise questions and all the rest of it, and just to ask that we are consistent when we deal with this. Okay, fair enough. We're going a very specific route here, but I say I'm just conscious that there are numerous issues with DFI, and again, on all matter of scale. And I think totally content, but as long as we're consistent, because I say this will, I can see this opening up a further lines of query as we go along, and which I'm content to broach as they arise. But just to make that point, Chair.
That's fine. Okay, we happy enough? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Final item of Chair's business is to congratulate Andrew and other members of the committee, including the Chair, on winning Dog of the Year yesterday. Andrew with Ray. I was beaten in the second place. Clearly, it's a mistake by the judges, but there it is. Andrew, you want to say anything about how you and Ray celebrated last night?
Not terribly, very low key, but I think she's gone back to type now this morning and making sure all the squirrels are well and truly up their trees in Castletown Forest Park.
Excellent.
Forest Park. So anyway,
Did you get a treat, Andrew?
oh, she got her treat. Yes, she got her treat, and she got plenty of belly rubs too. So
Okay.
very content dog.
Very happy dog.
Chair.
You did well.
And I know to Maxwell as well.
No, thank you very much. Did well. And a note to Deputy First Minister, who came in third with Rosie. Okay, so that's Chair's business. That takes us on item 4, which are the draft minutes. They are at page 7. Just need to seek committee agreement that they're content with the minutes and that they are a true and accurate reflection of that meeting on the 8th of October. Are members content?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'll sign the minutes. Excellent. Then on to item 5, which is matters arising. We are going to be hearing from Northern Ireland Water under item 7. This will be to do with the bill, and I would encourage members to try to keep their questions to items that relate to the bill. We also, at last week's meeting, agreed that we were going to schedule some oral evidence with NIW on its annual report and accounts, and to receive an operational update on those. Clearly that will be a very important session. As part of the prep for that, and to give NI Water an idea about where we'd like to explore, do members have any views on the areas of interest that they would like to explore with Northern Ireland Water? I have put down one, which is their current financial situation and the ongoing impact of that would be one for me. But if members have any other areas that they want to pursue with any water when they come to that oral evidence session, declare them now.
I think I raised a couple last week, Chair. Remember, didn't I? Yes,
you did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just down myself.
Thanks, John.
It was just to pin down, Chair, exactly what members wanted, because there's quite a broad
There is.
across the annual report. But, yeah.
Yep.
So one of them be finance. I mean, look, another one just for me to tie that down a little bit further was I remember reading in the chair's opening statement that, I mean, if I said that she was deeply concerned, I probably wouldn't be doing her justice. There was quite unusual language for a sort of chair's summary of the year, and I'll certainly will be picking that up. But if any other members have any issues that they particularly want to pick up, I would certainly encourage you to read that if you haven't already, the annual report and accounts, because we are going to ask Northern Ireland Water to come back in. Obviously, they're going to appear before us today around the bill. We're going to ask them back in then to take some oral evidence. So if any members have any things that they want to particularly raise, please let us know that, and we will pass that on to Northern Ireland Water. Can I get agreement that we write to Northern Ireland Water and ask them in? Mm-hmm. Okay. That's fine. Any other matters arising from the previous meeting? No. Okay. It takes us on to item 6, which is core. Page 18, we have the core table. The first item that I have is item number 6.3, which is a letter from DFI back on the A5 judgment. It's at page 24, I think, of your meeting pack. And it's back from the Minister, and it's a response to a note that we sent to DFI regarding an item that I raised, which was page 200 of Justice McAlinden's judgment on the A5. And the response from the department was that they worked extremely closely with DERA during the development of our detailed response to the PAC recommendations. 13 meetings were held between August 22 and 24. You may be aware that DERA has now applied to the court for permission to formally intervene in the A5 appeal, with this in mind. It'd be inappropriate to comment any further at this time. And I'm afraid my feeling is that that doesn't answer at all the question that we asked. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out part of page Justice McAlinden's judgment, and then we will be writing back to the department. But just for members' clarity on this, at page 200, at paragraph 200, Justice McAlinden said, the DFI statement does not detail or contain any reference to any such evidence being provided by DERA, and in contrast with the evidence provided by the Department for the Economy at the hearing of this matter, nothing was forthcoming from DERA to indicate that prior to the DFI making its decision, it had provided the DFI with any form of evidence or evidence-based assurance that, even in the absence of a finalised cap, it was formulating or coordinating plans, strategies and policies that would accommodate the construction, operation of the road, and at the same time would map out a realistic and achievable pathway for Northern Ireland to achieve net zero by 2050, meeting the interval targets on the way and staying within the proposed carbon budgets. Now, I would like committee to write back to the Minister and clarify specifically why the DFI statement provided to the court does not detail or contain any reference to any such material or evidence being provided by DERA. Now, the answers to that are either A, DERA provided the evidence and it wasn't included by DFI, B, DERA was not asked to provide evidence by DFI, or C, DFI asked DERA to provide evidence and it simply failed to do so. I like the answer to that. I think that's really, really important. And the A5 judgment is important for a whole range, like a whole host of reasons in Northern Ireland. And I don't think that the fact that DERA has joined the case is at all legally material to this. We're not asking about what the case is going to be or how the department is preparing for the case. We're asking about an aspect of the judgment of the previous one. So, as was often written in my school reports, must do better. I think the department must do better in terms of its responses to this. And to be honest, folks, if we can't get the appropriate written responses, I think the committee, in my view, and obviously it'll be a committee decision, my view would be to bring officials in and ask for oral evidence around this matter. But we're a bit of a way off on that one yet. Our committee agreed that, or if anyone has any alternative views or any opinions on it, that we do write back to the Minister on this. Any views, opinions?
Happy to support that, Chair.
Enough? Okay. Michael, you okay with that?
Yes, just to remind members, we're receiving legal advice, hopefully for next week's meeting, on the extent to which the committee should be engaging on the A5 decisions.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. That is fine. Then at page 25, there's a response from the Minister to queries raised by the Mineral Products Association Northern Ireland. Seek committee agreement to forward the response to the Mineral Products Association for Northern Ireland for information. People agreed? Yep. Page 31, a response from the department to committee core awaiting response. Just views on that. Folks, are members content or do they require any further action? I'm fairly content unless anyone wants to raise anything. We'll call that content. Okay. At page 41, core from Build Homes NI requesting to meet the committee to discuss issues around wastewater infrastructure, which is a very prevalent issue within this committee. Do we have a committee agreement to request written evidence prior to the scheduling of oral evidence by Build Homes? Are members agreed to that? Yep, two guys, yes. Page 55, core from a member of the public regarding the York Street interchange. Just need to seek committee agreement to write to the individual to suggest that the committee does not, on the most part, deal with individual cases, and to suggest core in the first instance directly to the department, and if this route is not successful or find a resolution, the next course of action is contacting NIPSO. Are people agreed to that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
If you refer them potentially back to the previous committee meeting where I think I and others raised York Street interchange with the officials, and they give a concerningly long pipeline, but it is there, and the officials are on record under the infrastructure projects, I think saying 10 to 11 years plus.
I think that's right. Okay. And also then just I need agreement to note the remaining items of correspondence. Committee agreed?
Yep.
Okay. In that case, we will move on to item 7, which is oral evidence from Northern Ireland Water on the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill. Just for committee members to follow the item, at page 57 we have the clerk's memo. At page 60 we have Northern Ireland Water's written evidence, and at page 66 to 115, copy of the bill, the EFM and other reports of evidence sessions relating to the bill. And just to remind members that the session is specifically with regard to the bill, whilst members, I'm sure, might be interested to explore other areas. We're not going to do that today, and hopefully Northern Ireland Water will come back and provide us with answers around their annual reports and the vision that they have and the issues that they face into. But today is really about the bill. And so I'd like to welcome Sarah Venning, who's the Chief Executive, Paddy Brow, the Head of Living with Water Programme, and John Burke, a Senior Lawyer who works with Northern Ireland Water. Can I get committee agreement that this evidence is recorded by Hansard?
Intent.
And therefore I can invite folks to make a brief opening statement up to 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. So look, you've done the introduction, so thank you for that. We welcome the committee's scrutiny of this important bill, which comes at a pivotal time for water and drainage infrastructure in Northern Ireland. As you'll be aware, the bill's provisions ranging from water use bans to sustainable drainage and the adoption of private drainage infrastructure will have a significant impact on how we manage water resources, address flooding and support sustainable development for years to come. NI Water supports the bill's alignment of hosepipe ban legislation with the rest of the UK. That provides clarity for customers and strengthens our own ability to manage drought events. We also strongly endorse the focus on sustainable drainage systems, or SUDs. The move towards nature-based solutions is essential for protecting our rivers and lochs, improving sewage performance and reducing flood risk and pollution. We look forward to working with the Department for Infrastructure on the guidance and the responsibilities and the funding mechanisms needed to make SUDs a success. A particularly significant aspect of the bill is the proposal to allow NI Water to adopt pre-1973 private drainage infrastructure. Our analysis, conducted in partnership with DFI, has shown that failures in some of these legacy systems have contributed to flooding incidents across Northern Ireland. So bringing critical elements of this infrastructure into public ownership where it is appropriate will help address defects and enable better long-term maintenance and resilience. Welcome as the bill is, however, it does need to be seen in context, and that context remains one in which there is a significant gap between the need to modernise our wastewater infrastructure and the available budget. The importance of addressing that gap has been underlined not just by the independent regulator, but also the work of the Northern Ireland Audit Office, the Fiscal Council, CEF working with NIFTA and Grant Thornton, and the effects of the gap are still very real. In the current financial year, NI Water has submitted to DFI an operating plan and budget that is based on the allocation provided, and what that means is, from a capital perspective, the large wastewater infrastructure projects in Belfast's Living with Water programme, as well as many drainage schemes across Northern Ireland, are for the most part paused, and they were not bid for. So as we approach the end of PC21, Northern Ireland will have invested £1 billion, which is about 35% less in its wastewater infrastructure than what was envisaged as minimum need by the utility regulator. So we receiving 90% of the funding we did bid for. That allows us to maintain the assets that are in place, but it doesn't address the infrastructure deficit that we all now recognise. In relation to Airdale, our operating plan and budget is formulated on the basis that weather patterns this year follow those of last year. And that does introduce some risk in the profile, given how dry last year was, especially in the second half of the year. And the Department have asked that we stay in close contact with them as the year progresses to monitor and to manage that risk, and we will of course do that. So given that context, we support Minister Kimmon's three-pronged approach to improving our wastewater infrastructure by implementing the provisions of this bill, exploring the potential of developer contributions and seeking further investment from government. Each of those elements can help address the legacy of underinvestment, as too will the kind of innovative approach that NI Water has recently trialled in Newry to facilitate additional wastewater connections. The constant challenge is to find ways in which NI Water can facilitate both the housing and commercial development Northern Ireland needs, whilst also not just protecting our environment, but improving it. And this bill should help achieve some of that balance. And that is why we are committed to collaborating with all our stakeholders to ensure the bill delivers practical, effective improvements for the people and the environment of Northern Ireland. And my colleagues and I are happy to answer your questions and provide any further details that the committee might require.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that opening statement. I suspect, despite the chair's best efforts to keep this purely to the bill, I think you might have opened yourself up to some wider questions given your oral evidence. But I'm going to try and stick exclusively to aspects of the bill. And I've got a couple of questions. One is around Clause 11, which is unlawful sewer communication remedies. I should say, sorry, before I go into some detail around this, I read your consultation responses. Is it fair to say that Northern Ireland are broadly supportive of the bill?
I think that would be fair to
Yeah,
say,
that was
yes.
okay. That's what came across. Okay, so Clause 11, ascertain the process for it's really around recovery of costs from landowners around communication remedies. Has Northern Ireland Water given any thought to what that process might be?
I'll maybe intervene here. Currently, one of the areas I oversee is our claims unit. So, for example, if a third party currently damages our infrastructure, be it laying pipes for Phoenix Gas or for one of the BT or an internet provider, where they damage our infrastructure, my claims team will gather the evidence in relation to the cost of that, and then we will engage directly with the third party who's caused the damage to recover those costs. We will get an estimate from our finance colleagues as to what it costs to repair the damage, and then we will engage directly with the provider, Phoenix Gas or whoever, to recover those monies. It'd be rare for that process not to end in a result for the recovery. It'd be rare for us to actually have to issue any proceedings against those third parties. But we've been operating that system for about 7 years since my claims team took it over, basically, and that we would propose using a similar approach. Those teams would gather the evidence in relation to the misconnection from whatever team has repaired that misconnection, and then we would engage with the householder for the recovery of those monies. It would be done basically by letter and correspondence.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, if I take you to some of your written evidence on members' committee packs. It's on 64, but I'll just read it out for you. It's around, again, similar issue. This work estimated that there are around 177 kilometres of known PDI in Northern Ireland, which is currently the responsibility of riparian landowners through which it passes. My Latin sirs, that must be something to do with water or banks. The next page, so the figure there is 177, and it sounds a wee bit like that was an estimate, and you've said that in the evidence. If I continue, Northern Ireland Water has marked 46 kilometres of this PDI on its GIS records, as Northern Ireland Water has around 14,500 kilometres of adopted sewers. If all 46 were adopted, it would represent an additional 0.3%. I suppose the first question just around that is, how did you come up with a figure of 46 kilometres?
Okay, I can answer that. So I was seconded to the department for 2 years in 2015, and it was a piece of work that I initiated, and Northern Water worked closely in partnership with the department and DFI Rivers and DFI Roads. And what we did was we got together all of our data sets, and we identified all the infrastructure that we thought someone else owned but wasn't ours, and then by a process of elimination worked out all the infrastructure which was providing a drainage function that none of us owned. And so, having identified it on our GIS systems, we then, in your packs, there's a little flow diagram that we developed together. And we just went through that flow diagram to work out, well, ideally, if we looked at every single pipe, who would own it? And so that meant that we were able to take the 177 kilometres that we'd identified and divide it up. And you see that really the roads is a very small part, less than 1 kilometre, but the largest was DFI Rivers and Northern Water. And so it's mapped. We know where it is now, and that was a good exercise to go through.
Okay. And if, as part of the bill, you were able to expedite work on this, what benefits, have you done any scoping exercises of what benefits might accrue from fixing these?
Yeah, we will take a reactive approach. We don't routinely survey all of our surface water sewers. So because it's a huge network, it's 14,500 kilometres. So, but we do have a programme of rolling drainage area plans and studies. And whenever we go into an area, if we've got a problem with pollution or flooding, we identify issues and constraints. And as part of that, we will survey what are known as critical sections that really, if they fail, there would be problems in terms of flooding or structural issues. And if we identify that a section of private drainage infrastructure is in poor condition, we will then be able to maintain it. The problem is at the moment, we've had, whenever a flooding instance occurs, we work in partnership with DFI Roads and DFI Rivers to work out how has that occurred. And who's responsible. And in various instances over the last 18 years, it's PDI, and that's been quite tricky in some locations to resolve if the pipe is over 100 was built before 1973. So we've had to, maybe in a section of pipe, talk to every single property owner of who owns a piece of ground through which it passes. And in one location, that was 15 houses. Whereas it would be much simpler to say, do you know what, that section of sewer is now acting as a Northern Water surface water sewer. We would like to adopt it because we would like to fix it, and it would just simplify things for us. So we typically find these things through our own surveys or because a problem emerges. And this we welcome this because it will enable us to fix them much more efficiently.
Well, that's very useful, Paddy, and I now understand your use of the term reactive there. So essentially, you will address this essentially when an issue presents itself, given the sheer amount of sewers, that sort of figure of whatever it is, 14,500. You can't really proactively go after this. It's
about 0.3% additional percent, and we do actually have instances where developers maybe take over a site. An example might be an ex-MOD site, and it's got some great built spine sewers that we would be happy to take over if they were just brought up to standard first. They maybe would apply to us through an Article 159 agreement for us to adopt it, but we have to say at the moment, I'm sorry, we can't, because you'd have to build a new one because the legislation says if it was built before 1973, we can't adopt it. And clearly that's in no one's interests. Yeah. So they want to give it to us, we want to accept it, and so this will that will unlock this. It's an efficient thing for us to do.
My last question is around Clause 12, and I'm going to quote the EFM to you, if that's okay, around Clause 12. The EFM says the sewage undertaker, what a great term, will not be required to adopt all pre-1973 private drainage infrastructure, but only that which Northern Ireland Water considers to be critical to the functioning of its sewage network. And it's that word critical that I want to focus on. And in the first instance, maybe just to get your views on that sentence I read out with particular note to that word critical.
Okay, maybe I can answer that. A critical drain, we have a definition for what is a critical drain, and it's a key drainage asset that plays a vital role in managing surface water, preventing flooding and protecting infrastructure and communities. The drains are considered critical because they serve high-risk areas, for example flood-prone zones or densely populated urban areas, or their failure or blockage could lead to significant consequences such as property damage, disruption of services or environmental harm. And in that case, if we deem it to be critical, we will go in and adopt it.
Okay.
And maybe if I explain how Article 159 operates generally, and how the amendment removing the restriction of 1973 will not change how it operates. Article 159 operates in one of two ways, in either of two ways. Whether you, Chair, as an owner of PDI, can approach us and ask us to adopt that. Now we can assess that and we can make a decision. We're not obliged to adopt it. We would say yes, we'll adopt it if you bring it up to standard, or we can say no, we will not adopt it. Alternatively, we can approach you, you can approach us, or we can approach you, and either, if we're approaching you to take it, we will take it warts and all. In either case, if you're not happy with our decision not to adopt it or our decision to adopt it, you actually have a right of appeal to the regulator under Article 162. So that will not change by removing the restriction on the date from pre-1973. So that's how it currently operates. It doesn't operate that often, and hasn't operated that often since 2007, but that's how we would envisage it going forward. And as Paddy says, where those particular 46 kilometres, which we feel are critical, that we will approach those as matters arise, and we will look in the long term to adopt those over time.
Look, thank you, John and Paddy. It's just that word will be, even though it's not in the primary legislation, it's just sitting there in the EFM in terms of how it's interpreted if this bill becomes law will be important. And now we have, well, certainly I have a greater understanding that actually there's a way that Northern Ireland Water, and it, to be fair to you guys, it's fairly comprehensive as to how you interpret that word critical, because we have to think of it not obviously just from your perspective, but from homeowners who may have a view on some of this. And when you pass legislation, you know, it needs to be right and also clear. I'm quite content with that. That's all from me. I'm going to pass you on to John, who's Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Sarah, Paddy and John. Thank you very much for coming along and for the evidence so far. Just to put this on record, Sarah, my thanks to your staff again for their communication throughout the difficult times over the last storm that we had. We had a massive outage in my area and they were very forthcoming with information, and things are put on again as quickly as possible. So thank you. You said just in your evidence that you assessed this bill as being very impactful for Northern Ireland Water, and I don't think we've any doubt that it will be. But I'm just wondering how you went about assessing how impactful it would be. And from Northern Ireland Water's point of view, is there aspects of it that you would have liked to have seen going further, or additional things that you might have liked to have seen in the legislation that weren't there?
Well, we worked in partnership with DFI many years ago to develop the long-term water strategy. So that was very much a piece of co-design work together. And we really wrote that from 2012 to about 2016, whenever it was passed by the Northern Ireland Assembly. And that identified that there was a lot of gaps in legislation that we needed to address. And so we've been really, for instance, the adopting pipework from 1973 before that, and indeed SUDS. We would, what is in here about SUDS is very needed. It'll really help us develop the next step of legislation. It would be great if we're a bit further on, but we're not. But this provides essential foundations for us to work together to resolve the way ahead on that. Private drainage infrastructure, SUDS, sustainable drainage systems, are really very helpful for us to retrofit to our network, but also to help developers be able to come up with the right type of SUDS. And this legislation will again help provide the foundations for us to move forward in that. It's been a bit of a block for the last 7 or 8 years, but there's a lot of work ahead which still needs to be done. So we need to have design guidance for developers. We need to have a SUDS approval authority, so who is going to approve their designs, who's going to approve the maintenance arrangements, and then once they're built, we need to have someone to check them. Those are things that developers want, they need, they're asking us for, and we welcome that. That's the next step. It's a pity it's not in this one, yes, but it's a step forward.
Can I just maybe add to what Paddy said? In February 2020, RHI Water held a workshop in Westland along with colleagues from the department and stakeholders, internal stakeholders, to review the 2006 order and to come up with a list of what we feel might benefit from being changed. That's a 6-page wish list which we sent to the department in 2020, and their own suggestions are in here as well. So we're happy that at least some of the matters that were contained within that document, and you put in a wish list, and you may reach for the stars, you're not going to go so far. We're happy that the department has taken on board the recommendations or the suggestions that we made in 2000 or 2020. Obviously COVID intervened thereafter and perhaps slowed matters down, but certainly we're happy to continue to engage with the department, and where there are other areas that may benefit from being amended, and we're happy to engage with the department going forward on those. But certainly we have provided the department with a list of things that we feel could benefit from amendment.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting, John. So obviously, as Paddy said, you worked hand in glove effectively to design this, or at least to feed into it. So it comes as no surprise that NI Water has no problems with any of the clauses. I would be interested though to see, if possible, to get a copy of that list to find out the second part of my question, which was, are there any bits of this legislation that you don't think went far enough, and what could well be added in? Because it might help us in both our scrutiny and potentially in amendments as well. Is it possible to?
I'm sure that I don't believe there should be any issue. As a department, we're given a copy of this.
Yeah, I don't think we've been furnished with it. That's my issue. So I'd like to know.
Okay, I'm happy to arrange that. Yeah.
Thank you. If I could move on then to clause 1, if you could just talk us through how you see the current situation versus how it will be different when it comes to water use and temporary bans, and also around. I raised this during the second stage reading. It doesn't seem like a massive issue, but within the legislation, the only requirement to notify the public is through 2 advertisements in the local paper, and I think we both know that invariably when the paper comes out, the hose pipe ban might well have ended. I know that Northern Ireland Water do it a lot more than that, but could you just talk us through, Sarah, potentially how you communicate with the public now, and how you inform the public and raise awareness about saving water during drought periods?
We've obviously used social media. We use our website, but if notices on the website, we use social media. We use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So those are being updated on a daily basis as we speak. Basically, where an incident happens, if there's flooding or if there's an outage, then those matters would be publicised through the social media. In relation to the hose pipe ban, as you've quite rightly pointed out, currently we can only advertise the hose pipe ban via 2 notices in a newspaper in the local area. The amendment allows us to publicise that through the website as well, and we will continue to use obviously social media in all its forms to publicise what's happening.
I suppose my point in that, John, was specifically, and I know you do that, my point was directly that that's not related. So someone has to go and buy a newspaper or visit your website, where social media and TV and radio communicates to the public at large. We do obviously the TV and radio. I take your point. Well. I made that point in the chamber. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's not contained in the legislation.
I would agree with you very much in terms of timing. So when you need a temporary usage ban, so our analytics would suggest to us that when the temperature in Northern Ireland goes above 22 degrees C for about 3 days, the demand for water increases by at least 100 million litres of water per day, which is maybe a 15 to 20% increase in production at the water treatment works. And that puts an enormous stress on those water treatment works, and they have a finite capacity. So this is not about, whilst this can help if you were in a drought situation and you had diminished raw water supplies, this is also very helpful where you're in a high demand event and your water treatment works cannot keep up with demand. And in those instances, speed is important. And in fact, in 2018, when we did introduce a hose pipe ban, and we were reprimanded for how we did that, the timing from saying I need a ban to I can secure the advertising space in a newspaper, especially if you need a ban on a Friday and you're into the weekend, can mean that you could see 3 days time lapsed before, and maybe then you have to advertise for 2 days, so you could be 5 days time lapsed before you get the outcome that you need. And so it is an improvement to be able to better utilise digital media for the purposes of notifying people.
Okay. Is there a piece that needs to be done as well around raising awareness to the public about education piece as well? Because this is one aspect of enforcement.
We would do that anyway in the lead up during the 2018 event. There would the comms team would have had regular engagement. We'd have been putting out regular press releases. We'd have been putting out stuff regularly on our social media, asking the public to consider their water usage. And this, when the temperature, as Sarah said, had gone above 22 degrees, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, we were aware of, on the analytics side, how much water we were producing, how much water was being requested. And so we were asking the public, prior to the ban coming in 2018, we were asking the public to consider their water usage and to reduce it. Things were getting critical, and then the ban came in, and that ban helped us through that critical phase, because the threat of enforcement was sufficient to change behaviour. Human nature, if you're getting something for nothing, you're going to use it. And without getting into debate on water charges, we don't charge for water for domestic users, so people were using it. The ban helped to rein that in for those 2 or 3 critical days over that weekend, so that our water production facilities could keep up with the demand.
But I think, though, to be fair, the work on publicity is very important. And the other thing to reassure the committee on is, since 2018, we have had a significant number of those high demand events.
Yes.
And we have, through improvements of how we operate our networks and the analytics that we have and the analysis that we have in relation to our reservoir levels and the actions that we can take through tankering water across our network, has meant that we have been able to continue to provide uninterrupted supplies of water to customers. It is a strain on the organisation, and there's a lot of extra hours worked by the people in the network and in the water treatment works. But that's the way you would want things to do. And if you think about climate change, a big part of our climate change approach will be how you're going to have these periods of warm weather, and you're going to have to be able to deal with them, and you would want not to be dealing with them via a temporary usage ban. You'd want to be able to have resilience in your network, and that would be our focus. So this is there should you need it, but you will be doing everything that you can not to need it.
And just for the record, and maybe it didn't come across, John, but to the team, I am fully supportive of this. I am ally of NI Water. It did feel like there was a bit of a prickly response there at times.
I apologise.
I am trying to make sure this legislation is as robust and sound to support the work that you do, and also to inform the public, and that is the role of this committee. Just moving on to clause 11, if I may then, Chair, I know you covered it. Could we just get an assessment roughly of how many such miscommunications happen per year at the moment, the difficulties surrounding those, and the justification for the extra steps that the legislation will provide?
Okay. Well, it's not how many are occurring, maybe it's how many there are, and there are thousands across Northern Ireland. So we do routine drainage area studies. We also investigate why is a bathing water quality failing, such as Ballyholme. We've had some instances near to Peter where the water quality hasn't been what it is. So we do an investigation or a study, or a shellfish water, or indeed the members of the public phone in and say, look, there's pollution occurring. So there was an example at Grimsport where our pumping station was suspected. So in those instances, whenever the public phone in or we identify something, we go off to investigate.
Yes.
And it's shocking how many misconnections there are across Northern Ireland. And typically they occur because a developer thinks he's putting a pipe into a foul sewer, and he's not. He's actually putting it into a river. Yeah. So centre of Belfast, large hotel was built. For several years it discharged into the Blackstaff, and it took us quite a while to find that. In Grimsport, when we investigated that instance, we found 20 houses had extensions to them in the Bray, in an area, and we had to work with householders to disconnect those from the little stream. Whenever we've been investigating Ballyholme, that bathing water, we tracked down that there was misconnections in an area of Bangor, I'll not name, but we knew that those houses were built with a surface water sewer on one side of the property and a foul on the other. And whenever they were putting a toilet in their garage as a little extension, because maybe they've got an office there now, it was on the side of the house that had the surface water sewer, and so they were connected accidentally. Now, the householders didn't know they were doing that, the builder didn't know they were doing that, but it results in pollution. So we investigated 137 houses and found 7 misconnections. So it can be everything from in Lurgan, Tesco's was connected to the river, the Pound River that was discharging into Lough Neagh. So we got reports of pollution. We checked all our assets; they were fine. So we've spent £750,000 on the Pound River investigating that. We found offices have been connected into that accidentally. We found various properties. It's quite expensive, labour-intensive work. You have to put little sieves in the system because you're working your way back up, and you get to this point and the sewer splits. Which way is it coming from? And it's slow, hard work, and we've got a team that work with hand in hand with NIEA. They typically get the reports of pollution. They bring them to us. We decide who internally is going to investigate it. Is it our operational colleagues? Is it a more intensive team? And off they go. We're constrained by, like everything else, by budget, but it's hard work. Most times whenever we find these instances, property owners will work with us to resolve it. Sometimes they don't. They don't want to, and we know pollution is occurring. This will help us, and sometimes these are very low cost to resolve, a couple of £1,000. Sometimes it's tens of thousands of pounds, and in those instances, it would be nice to recover the costs.
And that's, I suppose, the point obvious. That it's not the easy ones that you work with, it's the difficult ones and often the most expensive ones. So that you're confident, Paddy, this legislation will give you that ability to take swift and necessary action and to go after those who should be paying the price ultimately for it.
Yes, and it will certainly stop some delays. We had an incident where we identified a lot of pollution coming from a caravan park, which again we won't name, but we knew where it was coming from, and there was a lot of hesitancy there to resolve that. And eventually, after a quite a long time, we were able to, they agreed to resolve it, and it was fixed. But it would have been much quicker had we been able to resolve that. And we knew pollution was occurring to a beach in a popular part of Northern Ireland. So the vast majority of people want to resolve it when it's identified and brought to their attention. This will just help us in those instances where we know pollution is occurring. We want to get it fixed, and there's an impasse.
I think because we all acknowledge that every pound is a prisoner for NI Water, and that we want to make sure this, as much as possible, is cost neutral to you and opens up doors to be recompensed for the money that you're out. And that takes me to my final point, Chair, is around clause 12, which is what you were discussing as well. We've covered in depth the critical aspect. We may well come back to that again. My issues around, again, the cost. When the Minister spoke during the second stage reading in the Chamber under questions, she assured us that this would be cost neutral to Northern Ireland Water. But when John spoke, he said that we may well seek the owner of the land to adopt that with them. Before you come in, I know you're champing the bit to get in, but if not, we will take it on, warts and all. Now, warts and all to me as an amateur engineer, and if I'm nowhere near an amateur engineer, sounds potentially costly. How will Northern Ireland Water assure, given the Minister's contributions, that it will be cost neutral, given that pre-1973 infrastructure could well be damaged, dated and needed repair?
Okay, that's fine.
So we have a price control planning process, and our next one is called PC28, and we're currently assessing how much money we should allocate to this. And we don't think it's going to be a massive sum in the scale of things. There's two types of capital investment for the company. There's enhancement investment, which is to build new things and so on, and there's money to maintain things. Maintaining these assets would be under our base maintenance allocation, which is going to be approaching about £250 million a year. So if this was maybe, we haven't worked out a sum yet, but if it was, say, £1 million, it's in that sort of order. It has to be put in the context of this is 0.3% of our network, and so we're not going to be hunting these down. We will stumble across them through plans and studies, or they will emerge themselves, and we will have to react to them. For instance, we had flooding in an area of South Belfast. That was not acceptable for that to be happening to those people. We all had to work together anyway to resolve that. It cost us more because we didn't have this legislation in effect. It took us longer, and those houses all flooded again because we were still reaching agreement with the property owners. Had we been able to say, do you know what, this pipe's pre-1973, bang, let's adopt it, let's get in there, it would have been done much more quickly and cost effectively. So we're not concerned. Sarah's outlined in her opening statement about our concerns about operating costs and resource costs, but in the big scheme of things, this is not a significant concern for us.
Okay, so just to finish that point, out of the assessment of 170 plus kilometres of potential or more unadopted sites pre-1973 that are out there, given how long they've been there, have you done an assessment of how many of those in an ideal world you'd want to adopt quite quickly, and the cost that would potentially incur?
We've identified of that. I think in the table in the submission to you, we've shared that it's 47 kilometres of that. We've gone through that flow diagram and said, right, this is not a theoretical exercise. This is actual pipes. Every single pipe's been gone through. with DFI rivers, with DFI roads, 47 kilometres would come to us.
Okay.
So we're not going to go out and survey those on day one.
Yes.
That would,
We're
going to just be a long process.
Okay.
And we think over 12 years, the money that we need to invest in this will just ramp down to a very small sum.
Okay.
Some SIRS will last 150 years before they fail 250 years. Some might be dating back to Roman times, but some will have been built 10 years ago and will collapse.
Yes.
So we have to just be prepared to address them, and we're assessing what the sum will be, but it will be a relatively small sum in comparison to our bigger base maintenance figure.
I have a few more, but I'll come back at a later date potentially. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. To me, a quote from today from the media, it will be some date back to Roman times. Paddy,
The
I
archaeological
suspect.
dig.
So next up is Harry. Harry, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to see you at committee today. One thing was mentioned was developer contributions. I'm just wondering at what stage does a builder become a recognised developer that they can be making contributions? You know, is it 1, 2, 5 houses, or the difference between a private builder and a developer? You know, what's their thoughts on that?
Developer contributions aren't involved in the current revamp of the legislation, or are they?
But we're the part of the Minister's three-pronged plan approach.
Okay.
So it's probably maybe a question for the department team when they come in. So that consultation has gone out, and I think responses have come back in, but I'm not clear as to where the department will want to take that further. But in relation to anyone, I suppose, connecting a house does make a contribution, even if it's a single house. There will be charges that they make towards the connection from a water and a wastewater perspective. But the consultation is something specific, and it'll be, I suppose, for the department team to decide those qualifying stipulations.
The hose pipe ban, there's lots of temporary usage ban. And what about enforcement? What's the pathway to enforcement?
Well, I think I said when I was last before the committee, it's not about enforcement, it's about education, it's about encouraging people to use water wisely. I think I said then, it's better to have a stick and not use it than not to have a stick at all. And what we're trying to do here, firstly, the clarifications of the temporary ban compared to the current legislation, which simply defines it as you can't wash your car and you can't water your garden. The whole purpose of this amendment is to provide clarity. So, under the old current legislation, you can't water your grass, but you can hose down your patio and your paths, and you can wash down your windows. During a demand surge is illogical. So obviously England and Wales have had this since 2011. So the whole point of the clarification was to provide clarity to you as a consumer as to what you can't do in a demand situation. In terms of enforcement, ultimately it's a criminal offence, so that means we would have to have evidence to a criminal standard which is beyond reasonable doubt, and that obviously is not necessarily going to be easy. So what we're hoping to do is, again, during one of these situations would be, again, to use the threat, and also we've talked about social media and the website and press releases to encourage proper use of water. If worst case scenario we have to prosecute someone, then we have obviously the power to do so, but we would need to have evidence to a criminal standard basically. And that, it may not be that easy to get. We had in the past, 2018, I think I mentioned previously, neighbours phoning in neighbours as washing the car. We even had an ex-husband phoning in and complaining about his divorced wife who was obviously watering the lawn, which did make us laugh in the office when it came in. Anyway, so that's in terms of enforcement. We don't, and the power is there, but we would hope not to have to use it.
The education will be. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, just one question on that, John. When you talk about it to a reasonable standard for sort of criminal enforcement, so in order to meet that threshold, do you need a picture of someone with that's date stamped? I mean, just to explore that a wee bit, because some people will be interested in that. So how does that?
Well, one of the other teams I am responsible for is a compliance investigation team whose job is to investigate breaches of the legislation and to prosecute. So they will put together an evidence pack which can be comprising of statements, photographs, as she's mentioned, and other data from, say, for example, our metering data. So in this circumstance for a hosepipe ban, yes, if we had a photograph of someone out there washing the car or hosing the lawn, preferably date stamped, because these days with AI you can create anything, yes, that would constitute evidence. And if we have a statement, we would have, at the time, our staff would have been, our frontline staff would have been out in areas encouraging people not to do X, Y, and Z. So if we have member staff saw you washing the car or mowing the lawn or washing the lawn or hosing the lawn.
My wife would love to see me washing the car more often, but yeah.
Well, again, a statement from our frontline staff saying, we saw the chair out there washing the car in breach of a hosepipe ban. So yes, you would require an evidence pack, be it a photograph or a statement from someone willing to give it evidence that I saw X, Y, and Z on a given date.
So I'm going to bring Harry in because he just indicated to me that he wants back in. Just explore one more aspect of that. If somebody gave an affidavit or a statement to say, I saw the chair washing the car on the 15th of July, and it was simply that, and I gave a statement to say, I wasn't washing the car on the 15th of July, I was at Sainsbury's or Asda or whatever. I mean, you couldn't prosecute on that basis because you would need. I just want to teasing towards how much do you need to prosecute? I guess
the criminal standards is beyond reasonable doubt. But if I could just backtrack a little bit, we have a prosecution and enforcement policy, and it's a staged approach. It's not. We're not going straight into court.
I understand that.
So we would issue a warning letter or an enforcement notice. And actually, to issue a summons, that is almost the last resort where the person are not engaging and we feel we have sufficient evidence. So we'd speak to you, first of all, knock on the door. We've had this complaint, someone saying you were doing X, Y, and Z. Now, you may deny that there and then. That's fine. You may say, look, I'm not going to do anything like this. I didn't do it in the first place, but I'll make sure I don't do it. We're not going to hound you. If we have raised the matter with you, as far as we're concerned, unless we get another complaint the next day, he's still out there doing it, we'll come back again. We will put that to bed. We've issued you with a warning, or we've raised it with you. If we're getting regular reports of people breaching the legislation, then again we'll look to gather the evidence and see where that takes us. But ultimately, a court prosecution would be deemed to be the last resort. And that's how we operate currently through my compliance team, who are dealing with the interference with a number of our works.
That's great. Thank you, John. Harry?
No, it was just to add that. I know it used to be, I don't know what way it is now, but a hosepipe ban, you could still wash your car but rinse it with a watering can. Like that was... That was
right. Well,
there's one for you to take away, John.
Maybe under the old 73 order, perhaps.
Yeah,
okay. Certainly, the current 2006 is simply don't water your car. Can't wash your car and can't water your garden. And
I suppose the judgment call that you're making is: would you rather drink it or throw it around the car? Because at the point that we are asking for people to step back, it's because drinking water is at risk of not being supplied to somebody somewhere. So this is drinking water. So I think that's just the judgment people make.
Drinking water, whether we're putting it in the car or we're taking it out of a tap. Absolutely. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Harry. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, folks, for coming in again. Just a couple of points in terms of the SUDs. Different councils across the UK and obviously the Republic, there's quite a variation in different approaches and so on. I know this is something that you're very conscious of. I'm keen just to know what is your NI Water's view on the approval body, and is there a feeling that it is going your direction, or it may be landed with yourselves, but obviously funding and resources is going to be a key issue around that. So I'm keen just to hear your thoughts.
Paddy's probably best to pick up on this, but it's about, from my perspective, it's what is the most appropriate body to be the approval body, and really not so much about funding. Where is it most appropriately sit? But Paddy, you might want to.
Well, I think Northern Ireland would say we don't think it's right that we lead on that, and that will be our consultation response to the DFI Sustainable Drainage Directorate, who are leading on the consultation. There's a range of people who would need to be involved at the table, and who's best placed to call them together. There's DFI Rivers, there's DFI Roads, there's DFI Sustainable Drainage Directorate, there's the councils, and there's also ourselves, and there's the Environment Agency, and all of those people need to be together to really look at, is this design, does it work for us? Because if it doesn't work for us, it might cause flooding of the roads, it might cause flooding of a water course, or it might overflow into our sewer network. So the vast majority of these are not going to be connected to the combined or the foul sewer, and most of them won't even be connected to our surface water sewers. Most of them will be directly connected to water courses. So we have to understand where they're going to be built, what they're going to be connected to, and who's the stakeholder in that process. So almost certainly we should be at the table, because some of them we will be maintaining parts of them. They'll have flow control devices. They will typically have hard pipes, which Northern Water will be adopting, and we do at the moment. But most of the surface water features will probably not be maintained by Northern Water going forward, because we have to ask who is the people benefiting from it. If essentially a parkland is going to be created which serves the community and benefits the community, so the people who are going to be maintaining it going forward and looking after it would have to be part of it. So we don't have the answer to that, and maybe it's not appropriate to preempt the findings of the consultation of the next stage, but that does need to be resolved. And in England, the SUDS approval authority is made up of councils and water companies.
I was going to say, is there a model, do you think, across these islands, or GB, UK, that does work best? Is it? I know Wales and England have different approaches. Do you think council should take a lead role?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if I was a member of a council, would I want to be involved in co-designing or saying what I'm going to accept? Because typically these things will become park features. We have been able to build lots of SUDs in Northern Ireland over the last 20 years, and 15 or 10 years ago I myself organised a tour for this committee to go around various examples. But the examples we showed you were all things that were being built underground that people would never see. There was geocellular tanks in Bangor, there was one at Carrow not so far away from here, and that was a great shame, because we were missing the opportunity to daylight water courses and to create ponds and green spaces. And the learning from Scotland and Wales and England is you can really enhance your environment if you make water part of that. And I must call out Belfast City Council and say congratulations to them, because 5 years ago they put in place a blue-green infrastructure strategy, leading piece of work that was great. They said they want to transform Belfast, and they want to bring water back into the city and use it to enhance parks and the environment. So absolutely, do they want to be involved? Yes, we've been meeting them recently to look at retrofitting SUDs to a park in Belfast, and we're very much working with them and the department to how should that be designed.
There'll probably be 11 different approaches from councils in terms of appetite to take stuff on. Sometimes Belfast can be maybe more hands-on approach, on different issues. So that's interesting. One that that debate will continue. Just another point on the unlawful sewer connections piece. I suppose is it the case where you do find resistance when ultimately you're going in to fix an issue? And is that, do you think that, the powers of entry are required?
We think 9 out of 10 times people are very responsible.
Yeah.
I might have mentioned one supermarket, others are available, but they would have been horrified to find out that they had a misconnection and dealt with it very promptly. And most people who do find out they have a misconnection are like that. The vast majority of these have not been done intentionally, they've been done by accident, because people are not experts at knowing that there's 2 pipes in my garden, one is foul, one is surface water. They and a builder will connect into it, and if we come along and knock the door and say, look, you're causing pollution, their typical response is, crikey, how do I get this resolved?
Of course, but you have the tools there if required.
Yes.
Through this, really, no, that's okay. Okay, thanks, folks. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of trying to go through them in half order here. when it comes to the hose pipe ban again, you've already you mentioned sort of the analytics and seeing your operations room. Like, and I have no doubt there's a lot of data coming through there. It's very impressive, and sometimes I think with no shortage of water, it's just the moving it and the treating it. That's the issue. So it is. You mentioned 15 to 20%. Just what's the financial saving there? I mean, or what's the financial
it's
kickback in that? Obviously, that then is able then to.
It might not be. It depends on the duration, because if you think about it, that high demand event could last for only 1 or 2 days, or maybe 3 or 4 days. Yeah. So it's not like you're not doing that to save the cost of the production of the water. Mm-hmm. You're introducing this to ensure that you can reliably produce large quantities of water. So, for example, if I took a water treatment works and I'm running it at 100% for 5 days in a row and it breaks, well then all of the water in that water treatment works is lost to the network, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm not overstressing my water treatment works. So that we haven't necessarily worked out the additional cost of the 10 or 15% per day. There will be some additional costs. The bigger additional cost in any of these events is the fact that you're manning your water treatment works maybe 24/7 when we don't normally do that, and you're tankering water across Northern Ireland, and that can run into millions of pounds. If you have to run a fleet of tankers from an area where you have water into an area where you don't have water, and it's not very efficient, because a tanker only has 16,000 litres in it, and you're trying to move, I'm talking about millions of litres of water. So the avoided costs of some of those interventions that you have to make can be significant, into the hundreds of thousands of pounds.
So preventative, definitely. Yeah, okay.
And it's also to make sure that when you turn your tap on, the water flows.
Yeah.
So we're making sure that no one goes out of supply. That's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, keeping people in supply at all times.
I don't want to get too lost in stuff, but then I suppose it's about keeping the processing plant within 70%, so it has that capacity. Is that sort of the analogy you're trying to make then?
It's did you say within 70%?
You said that you don't want the processing plant to be working 100% and then it sort of maxes out and breaks, you know what I mean? Is that the idea then, to sort of keep it, sort of have a...
Sort of, keep it running.
Keep it off the limiter sort of thing?
Each water treatment works has what's required, what's called a safe operating load, or there's a specific term for it, so it's keeping it within those levels.
Dead on, thank you very much. Is there any, I think you did touch on this, but again, just having an area in my own constituency that has flooded through surface water, is there any, are there hotspots where you'd be concerned about the flooding incidents due to the PDIs being unadopted? And and again, I was a wee bit concerned just again because of, you mentioned that it's just to check that there are areas that there are surface water issues. Ms. Vannon, you've been very good at communicating with the local group to me, if that makes sense, but there are just ongoing concerns about flooding, really, you know what I mean? How will this be able to affect the areas like that, and how would you...
Yeah, it'll help us fix it more quickly, because at the moment, if we meet with stakeholders and say, right, we've had a flooding instance here, and it's because a section of private drainage infrastructure is blocked or deficient or not large enough, we all have a collective sigh. It's pre-1973, because we know that is just going to be so much more difficult. If it's DFI rivers, they don't have that problem. If we go through the flow chart in your packs and work out it's actually a water course, they can crack on and designate it and get things underway. If it's acting as a Northern water sewer in effect, but it's pre-1973, then we know it's going to be so much more difficult. It's a case of, do we build something new, or are we going to enter into a potentially long, difficult challenge? And if it's down a public road, that's dead easy. But if it's in private gardens, it's very complicated. So this will help us just expedite the process of resolving flooding.
But it is unlikely. So the big, well-known flooding schemes that people maybe are probably for incapacity reasons in the sewers, and actually that's what they ask for. Large scale investment in drainage infrastructure is designed to address. So we're not flagging up particular big high-profile schemes that are happening because of this PDI. We're saying that when we see it, it takes a whole lot longer to fix, and actually this would be better for people if we just were able to get on with it.
Touching on something you said in your opening remarks, and it linked into the sustainable drainage, improving sewage performance. I'm just wondering what evidence or what aspects of this have you seen that actually that it works in order to improve sewage performance? Again, we all know the infrastructure capacity issues that we have. So again, just in your opinion, where have you seen or how have you seen, and what is the potential for this to improve the sewage infrastructure?
Is your question in relation to private drainage infrastructure?
Or the bills?
SUDS.
Drainage. You opened up and you said about the...
Okay, so we welcome the department has done something which is wonderful. They applied for a government transformation fund for a pilot project for SUDS, and we really welcome that because we need to get surface water out of our network. There's just too much surface water enters into our network. We call it unwanted water. And a lot of places in Northern Ireland, there's large areas of backs of gardens, driveways, even streets that are connected into a combined sewer, which means that whenever it rains, we have storm overflows discharging, causing pollution. We want to get that water out. To get that water out, sometimes the water course doesn't have capacity, so we have to slow it down. We've got to mimic nature. Nature never created big pipes that rushes the water down to the sea very, very quickly. It slows it all down. So by retrofitting SUDS, that will really help us reduce pollution. But there's a question about how complicated is that? How much will that cost? Can we, at the same time as building SUDS, not just build big oversized tanks and concrete things which are going to add no value? Can we put in nice features that will be a benefit to the local community? And so that's what we're going to be using that funding for. So the department came to us and said, can we deliver it? We said, of course, and we're working with the department over the next 3 years to deliver. It could be between 15 and 30 million pounds of projects. We've selected an area of Belfast to work because we have to work in one concentrated area to see the benefit. It spans 2 councils. It spans Belfast City Council and Antrim and Newton Abbey Borough Council because of their characteristics and issues. But the network we're doing the work in is our worst performing network, where we've got a lot of overflows that discharge, even some in dry weather, into Belfast Lough, causing pollution. Retrofitting SUDS in this location will reduce the amount of surface water that enters the network that causes these pollution events. So it's not going to be, it doesn't replace the need for the large capital schemes. The treatment works that serve Belfast all need to be upgraded for environmental reasons and to provide increased capacity for economic growth. But it's a part in the jigsaw, which means we can start making those improvements. So we would say it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't take away the need to invest, to find the funding to do those investment projects, but it's part of the jigsaw of helping it to improve. And in time, people will see that their environment in which they live and their parklands become more attractive. They will see less pollution in rivers. Rather than turning their back on a river because it's full of sewage whenever it rains, they will turn towards that river and recognise it's providing a benefit. So we welcome this as a step forward.
Final one, Chair, final one. Just in your opening remarks there, you mentioned that infrastructure has been paused and not bid for, and I don't want to sound prickly here, if that makes sense, but has NI Water given up on the infrastructure? I mean, because we all know the scale that it is, but I mean that's certainly
very, very, very much not so. However, when we know that a scheme is it's hundreds of millions of pounds of a scheme, and we're being asked to plan within a 312. We were asked to plan for 321 million. We have received additional funding that has taken us to 361. But if I have a £200 million scheme that runs over 2 years, I have no way to be able to set aside £100 million a year for 2 years, because I have no window into the second year, and I can't afford that 100 million within the 300 million envelope that I have when I take out, you know, a cost that got to £200 million to do the maintenance. So therefore, I can't bid for that money because I can't deliver the scheme. And we are getting to the point where we aren't designing future schemes. Now, we have a number of schemes ready to go, but we couldn't bid for those big living with water schemes because they are multi-year and they are hundreds of millions of pounds, and they don't fit into a 321 plus or minus whatever funding might come your way window. Once you start it, you are committed, and you'll have to be able to keep going. And we were and the Living with Water Programme Board said that the funding wasn't available, and therefore we had to pause. And those big schemes are paused, and we can't bid for them at this point.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Andrew, I'll stick on that for a second. Sarah, who are the Living with Water Programme Board? I just don't know.
So the Living with Water Programme Board, Living with Water was such a big and strategic programme of work drainage for Belfast. It was chaired by DFI, and they formed a programme board that then brought together all the interested parties. So NI Water, the Environment Agency, the Utility Regulator, the Council, and that's how the Rivers Agency as well, and that's how we designed an efficient way of dealing with drainage in Belfast, making sure that everybody wasn't trying to solve their own problem. We were all working together to solve a holistic problem, and that keeps your costs lower, albeit it is an expensive solution. That working together kept your costs lower, and the scheme, or the work that was agreed needed to be done, 90% of it would have been delivered by NI Water, but the programme board was chaired by DFI. And whenever inflation occurred and the cost, when we were revising our strategic outline case and the costs had increased, the permanent secretary at that point in time asked the SRO to conduct a review, and the recommendation coming out of that review was to stand down the Living with Water Programme Board, and that the funding wouldn't be available for the programme, which then brought about the pause. So it means that I can't bid for the funds because I've been told there are no funds. But we've been very clear. What we did is we took all the work on to outline business case. So we know and have designed and are ready to go, or were ready to go. We had the supply chain in place as well to deliver work in Belfast Wastewater Treatment Works. And we're doing the same for Whitehouse and Kinniger, all in the Belfast area. But that work, people will say, well, it's up to NI Water to decide what it is that they can do. They've been given £361 million this year, but I can't take that decision because I can't allocate a chunk, 200 million out of 361 million. There would be too many other things that are not being done, that I wouldn't be a functioning water and wastewater company. So therefore those projects are paused.
One question, just in terms of the language used there, you used the term bidding. Again, just walk me through how Northern Ireland Water bid for something. And my understanding would be that the department would bid for executive funding, and then it would be apportioned out. Just explain that bidding term. Sorry.
Our bid would be us informing the department as our shareholder.
Okay.
So we don't have any direct, but we engage with the department as our shareholder.
Essentially, you're saying to the department, look, if you want us to deliver the Living with Water programme, we need this, and the department will take a view as to whether or not it will progress that.
Yes.
Essentially, that's
yes.
fine.
And I think the step back is that in a 6-year window, we set out all the things that the water company should do here in Northern Ireland. The utility regulator scrutinised that and has said that is the minimum that is necessary to be done for water and wastewater infrastructure in this 6-year window. Please go ahead and do it. And they've scrutinised it to say, and we think you're doing it at least cost. So then based on that programme, we then submit each year to the department and say, in year 1 of PC21, we need this amount of investment, in year 2 and in year 3. And then we are held to account for delivery of kilometres of water mains refurbed, number of water treatment works enhanced, and the Environment Agency are holding us to account to say, I want higher standards, and then we say this is the investment that's required to do that. And where we find ourselves now in year 5 of that PC21 programme, we will not be able to deliver the outputs that the regulator has set are the minimum for Northern Ireland, because we haven't been given the investment to do those schemes.
The next time you're back, it'll be an interesting session when we turn to finance. That is very useful. Sarah, I have one more question for Paddy, and you referenced something there, Paddy, a transformation fund. Just for clarity, is that the public sector transformation fund? Okay, which is looking like it's giving you 50, if this is right, from DOF. Is it Natural Solutions Urban Drainage?
Yes.
Yeah, so not in year 25, 26, 375. I assume these are hundreds of thousands. So sort of 375,000 next year, and then it significantly scales up to 4.5 million. And
our understanding is that the department are going to be given £15 million from that fund, and then they will be match funding it. And over that, well, that's their intention and hope. And we are certainly ramping up to be able to deliver that, and it'll be really helpful for us to give us an understanding of what does it cost to retrofit SUDs. So it's not about, a lot of this legislation is looking towards
new stuff and putting them in. This is retrofitting,
and we want to retrofit, and we welcome that.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted a clarity, just in terms of where that money was coming from. Nicola, online with her hand up, and she's been so patient, and there she is.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your briefing here this morning. It's great to see so much positivity and hear so much positivity about this bill in particular, and Sarah, your remarks about the Minister's three-pronged approach overall when it comes to the issues around wastewater infrastructure. We all know there are serious issues and want to see them addressed, so I'm pleased that you're supporting the Minister's actions. And John, you'd mentioned the 2020 report from stakeholders and the fact that the Minister's taken on those recommendations. So we often talk about the fact we need to be listening to the experts in the room who fully understand the issues. So that's really welcome as well. I just want to pick up on some of the conversation about the hose pipe ban, and particularly what you talked about with Andrew there about the potential cost saving with tankering at the minute. Like, how often does that there happen where you have to move water around the north where it is costing millions?
Well, it depends on the size and scale of the event. So the 2010 freeze thaw, I think the tankering was £5 million, I think. In this summer, I could come back I think I should come back to you, but I'm sure that we have used tankers in at least 3 occasions, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near hundreds of thousands of pounds. It would have been tens of thousands of pounds of tankering that would have been done during this summer.
Okay. No, if you could come back with that, Sarah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in regards to the hosepipe ban, how often is that used at the minute? And do you see it being significantly increased, I suppose, because of climate change and the change to our climate and more kind of adverse weather situations? Do you see that happening more often?
Prior to 2018, I think the last hosepipe ban was 1995, if I am stand to be corrected. I'm not aware, certainly NI Water had not introduced a hosepipe ban since 2007, and my understanding is in 95 there was in fact a ministerial direction which, because of the situation at that time, prior to that I couldn't comment as to when there was last hosepipe ban. We certainly have raised awareness during other events where the weather has gone to the stage where water is being used and we're trying to keep up with demand. We've done a lot of publicity at the time, but the actual last time we did the hosepipe ban was 2018.
And in relation to climate change, you can absolutely expect more stress water stress. So you can see in the UK this summer there were a number of companies that did have to ask for hosepipe bans or temporary usage bans. I think part of what we do as our long-term water strategy that feeds into our price control processes is that we look at what would you need to do to reinforce your water network to try and prevent the need to have a hosepipe ban. So what you will always try to do is to make sure that you have sufficient capacity in your water treatment works to produce the water, sufficient capacity and connections in your clean water distribution network to transfer water, and sufficient practices to make sure you're operating your network to the best of your ability so that you don't need this. But climate change means we will need to do more to make that happen, and we will need to invest more capital in our water treatment works and invest more operating costs in running our business so that customers do not have a hosepipe ban and are not inconvenienced.
I think that's fair enough to know that it's going to be a last resort kind of thing instead of a first approach. Sorry, go on ahead, Paddy.
And maybe just some good news. Although the funding has been constrained in this price control period, we were able to deliver phase 1 of something called the Belfast Water Resilience Hub, which is we identified that we are having to increasingly use tankers at times, and the arrangements we had in Belfast were not really great. So at Kennedy Way Hub, which is a new hub we've recently opened in the last 2 months, we have built a state-of-the-art, fantastic tanker filling point, which means we can bring road tankers in off the road. We can fill them in about 10 minutes, and it's connected up to our 2 largest water treatment works via something called the crosstown main. So it can be supplied with water from the Mournes or from Denore Water Treatment Works, and that's now operational, which is great. We will extend that facility in the future and other price controls to include other resilience features. But that's just, as Sarah said, since we've taken over the network 18 years ago, we've been slowly investing in trunk mains, making our system more resilient, connecting up each of the treatment works, so that if a water treatment works goes down, we're much more able to. The last resort is an outage to customers.
Yeah, no, that's good, and hopefully we'll see that being extended over to West Rowan at some stage. I just wanted to make one final point. It was
stretch there, Nicola.
Can always never forget about the rest of the ban. Just about the advertisement of hosepipe bans. Like, I agree with you. I think what the minister had said in response to those questions was that, you know, the minimum standard would be to have it in 2 newspapers, but that she would also agree that, you know, it should be on social media and that there as well, so people obviously get notified as quickly as possible. So I think that does make sense. Most people will agree with that there. But I just want to make that point. And listen, thanks very much. It was good to see you here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicola. Justin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks. To what extent is this bill a catch-up, tidying up bill?
I suppose, as John said earlier on, we identified a lot of issues starting off with the long-term water strategy, and it does address a lot of loose ends that exist, not just for Northern Waters legislation, but in other parts of the legislation.
How does it differ from SPS 2015, PPS 15, and the Water and Sewage Act, Water and Sewage Services Act 2016? How does it go beyond them?
2016 Act, I think, was just a minor. Hold on, I have a copy of the 2016 Act, I think. Well, no, I haven't.
Maybe we could take that away to come back, as we're probably not qualified to give you a concise answer on that this morning. You know, on one hand, you could say, is it a catch-up? But on the other hand, it from my perspective as Chief Executive, not having the clauses available to us in the temporary use ban did impact us this summer. So as we were operationally thinking about heading into a summer where we were looking at high demand, knowing that we didn't have that clarity for the public and the advice that we can give them was a difficulty. In relation to SUDs, not having the ability to have that natural SUDs or soft SUDs is something that's missing. So you might call it a catch-up, but actually it's important, and it will be beneficial. Misconnections is something we generally talk about within NI Water as something that we know to be a difficulty and want to see resolved. So these are good things. While you might call them a tidy up, they're definitely good and beneficial.
I think the 2016 Act was the first time that SUDs became enshrined in legislation, with my recollection, and I think possibly also it removed our need to install meters for new domestic connections, whereas if you're building houses, automatically meters were put in even though we're not billing you. And I think the then minister felt that was perhaps unnecessary. My recollection, when I say I can check the 2016 when I go back, those to me are the two key things: the first introduction of SUDs as encouraging developers to consider SUDs and for us to be able to consider SUDs, and then I think the removal of the requirement to install new meters to all new properties. It's a very short act of my recollection. I did have my hand on a copy of it this morning, and I replaced the file. But I'm certainly happy to look at to see what it contains.
Okay, notwithstanding, there's positives around hosepipe, SUDs, flood protection, environmental impact, miscommunications, sewage undertaker, all of that, given that I do think that should have been a long time ago and implemented, and were our developers and contractors obliged now to implement SUDs, and what is the requirement? Is it greenfield runoff, or where do things stand, or what is the threshold level for implementation of those guidelines, and are they obliged to?
So in most cases, whenever a developer is doing development, DFI Rivers, not Northern Water, will say that they've got to be restricted to a greenfield runoff, or if we are having to take the water into our surface water network, we've ultimately got to discharge it into river, so that they impose on us. So we pass that back up the line. So in a lot of cases, developers are being required to put in sustainable drainage systems, and they want to do the right thing. They want to create an attractive development. However, it's quite tricky for them to build the right type, which is soft suds, green features. And they have typically, they go through a process of wanting to put in green suds. And that might be cheaper, it might be more attractive, but at the end of the day, they know they will get us to approve the design for hard suds, which is a oversized concrete pipe or a big geocellular system. So they go down that route. What DFI wants to do, and we would support DFI in that, is it wants to give developers options to help them reduce the cost, to help them build more attractive things going forward. And that's why this bill enables that subsequent legislation to be brought in after the consultation. So that there's work ongoing, and we're not through to that stage yet. We've got to work with the other partners here, the drainage people involved in drainage, to work out how we're going to do that. But let's look forward to a future where a developer can come to a SUDS approval body chaired by whoever, with whatever members, and they get great guidance about what type of SUDs we would like them to build. They're very clear on the design guidance. They go off, they design it, they come back, and they get approval. That'll be great. We're not there yet. That's the future, and we all want to get to that point.
Okay, forgive the pun. That's downstream. In terms of Newry, and I'm delighted that there has been an innovative approach adopted to free up our connections to up to 400 units, £26 million invested. What did that innovative approach actually entail? Was it around separation and offsetting through separation, or will it entail an upgrading of the Warren Point Road pumping station? What were the innovative solutions on that front?
Yeah, so look, too often people might say that I come to this committee and decry a lack of investment, and so it is very clear that Northern Ireland as a whole is struggling with the amount of capital available to it. So NI Water, in trying to play its part, could see we have a huge programme of capital investment looking at drainage, and we took the innovative approach that we took is, in the past you might have had a water treatment works that was at capacity, and you said what needs to happen there, and invariably it needs to get made bigger, which costs a lot of money. So what we thought is, actually, let's look at this as a whole system. So how does stuff get to the water treatment works? Well, it comes through a sewer network. What's connected to that sewer network? What traders do you have? And then the world has moved on, and there are now all sorts of innovations in terms of sensors and IT equipment and systems. So we worked with what's known as the Small Business Research Initiative and some companies who had innovative products, and we put sensors in the sewers, and we were able to take signals back from that to understand what was happening in that sewer network. So Paddy has talked about unwanted water, so you can identify areas where there is unwanted water in your network. We worked with local traders in the area who, for their very own good reasons, were looking at their own effluent, and their effluent was coming to our works and was a large chunk of the treatment capacity in our works, and they took steps on their site to do more pre-treatment, therefore reducing the load on our works. So when you take all that into account, what we have been able to say is, if we apply this whole catchment approach in Uri, as well as investing maintenance money in our works and looking at our processes and upgrading some of our equipment, but not building new tanks, we have been able to create the space that facilitated, that took us from a place where we were having to say, that's a town that is closed to new development, to actually we've created some space to be able to connect development. Now, what it doesn't do is, traditionally, when we do the traditional builds, you are future proofing, and you are getting maybe 20 or 30 years future proofing, and we were designing for enhanced environmental standards. So we know that the Environment Agency is bringing in, as is the case in the UK, that standards are increasing. So our investment programme would be looking to say, in building for the future, we need to build to meet these standards. This doesn't do that. It doesn't make the environment any worse. It provides some environmental betterment, but not the level of environmental betterment that we need to do, that we would all want to do, and the Environment Agency would ask us to do. But it certainly doesn't make things worse. It does make things a little bit better, and it has created some capacity. It isn't the fix. So, people could get very hopeful and say, well, you could do that everywhere and that'll be great. So, if I look at some of the work the things that are happening in Belfast and the pollution that we know that exists in Belfast Lough, we will not be able to address that unless we invest in the big wastewater treatment works and in some of the sewer networks. But we have taken Uri as a pilot. We didn't know if it would work or not. We think that it will, or we now believe in it, and we are investing our money in it. We're looking at 4 other areas to see, because every catchment is different. You have all different types of traders, you have all different types of connections. So we're looking at 4 different areas to see if we can get some additional capacity in those areas. Now, again, that's not a quick fix, because you have to study it for the guts of a year to understand the flows in your network. You have to take the seasonality, because the worst thing you could do is make a judgment based on summer flows, and then the winter comes and you have flooding. So we're looking at 4 additional areas, and we are looking to say, how can you utilise this type of innovation to make sure that when you are putting your bid in for your next capital programme, you are making the best use of the investment that you get.
Well, listen, I applaud that collegiate approach. Working with traders and working with the stakeholders at hand is very positive, and I know that's a drop in the ocean in terms of the number of housing developments that are stalled because of lack of access to the treatment network. And the big rampaging elephant in the room is capacity, and no drains, no cranes. Have you conducted an audit of what the economic downside is of lack of capacity in the sewage network? Is there an audit whereby you can say this level of economic development is being held back and at the cost to the economy on an annual basis of this amount, because there's huge economic positives from getting the construction sector up and running properly to within its capacity, which it can't do now because of lack of capacity in the network? Is that something that...
Well, I think that people generally welcome when that kind of work is done by independent third parties. So I think I would point the committee probably towards the Northern Ireland Fiscal Commission's report on water sustainability. And there's some good analysis in that report. And then, if you think about some of the work that the industry bodies are doing, so the Construction Employers Federation alongside Grant Thornton, I think their report also will give some interesting facts and figures. And certainly they quantify that reduction in building activity in Northern Ireland that is currently present. And we have done some work in the past with the University of Ulster around the economic benefit associated with investment in water and wastewater infrastructure.
Just to keep it focused on the bill, if we can, that would be good, Justin.
Final question, and that is 6-page wish list you mentioned. What wasn't included?
What wasn't included?
Do you want it to be included?
Just I'll get the wish list out again.
You probably need.
We're all dying to see
for
this wish
time's
list.
sake, we should come back to you.
I think
There's a range of areas, but certainly I would happily come back.
And it would probably be fair to say that the department took on board. There's so much capacity that people have, and that they took on board the most important areas. I would.
You're going to provide that wish list,
Yes.
Justin. We'll get you cited on it, okay? Because I think that will be certainly interesting for the committee to have a look at.
One final quick question.
Sure.
In terms of enforcement, those miscommunications, how do you enforce?
Well, typically people and companies are horrified when they find out and are quick to work with us. So the hotel in Belfast, the shopping, the supermarket dealt very, very quickly. As I mentioned once, there was a caravan owner, I'll not mention the site, who didn't want their season to be interrupted by digging up their caravan park to fix the connection to, and that was a frustration. So typically people are very responsible. It's just in the instances where sometimes they've got maybe commercial interests that don't align to environmental interests. So we're very much driven by protecting the environment and customers from flooding, and so that's what drives us. And where there's a clash, that's whenever this will be helpful.
But I can confirm no one has been prosecuted on the basis of Article 166.
Well, let's say some business refuses to comply. What are the powers of enforcement?
If it's a misconnection under Article 166, we have a power of entry to go in and repair the connection, and following the amendment, recover the costs. Under the current legislation, we can only recover the costs from the offender, someone who's caused the misconnection. Under the new legislation, proposed legislation, we'll be able to recover. You're the occupier, you're the current owner. You may not have carried out the misconnection in the first place. It's not your problem. We can go in and recover the money from you once the amendment comes into force.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you to John, Sarah and Paddy for what was the longest oral evidence session I've ever experienced in the Northern Ireland Assembly. But I hope it was both respectful and thorough, which is what this committee tries to be. I know you're going to be dying to come back to us really soon to talk about finance, and we'll be no doubt looking forward and lying awake, looking forward to that one hopefully in the next few weeks, because that's going to be an important session for us as well. But I'd like to thank you for coming, answering all the questions, and the committee will probably be writing out to you with a few additional points to request some more information.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that.
You know the time pressure now, Michael, over?
The next committee would usually come in at 2. It wouldn't be unheard of that committees are asked to
Get out.
delay.
We'll be fine.
Be polite.
Is it education next, is it?
Education.
Oh, the chair's all right.
Let's stall it for as long as we can. So, members, following that session, are there any suggested matters arising or suggested actions? One that I picked up, which was already noted, and Justin picked up on it towards the end, and I think another committee member actually raised it in the first instance, was the what was now called, was simply called the wish list from maybe February 2020 and get committee side of that. Do any members have any other things they want to flag up? Justin?
Just that audit piece. What is the cost to the economy of lack of infrastructure?
Okay. There
Three mentioned reports. Could we collect those for our packs so we can have sight of those?
Okay. Noted. That's fine. Anyone else got anything in terms of follow-up? Michael, did you have anything in particular that you wanted to raise?
No, it was just those points, Chair.
That's fine.
They were going to come back on figures for 2025 on how often water had been moved by tanker.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us a 2020 figure of 5 million. So it was just that.
Okay. That's fine.
Sorry, there were a number of points that pieces of legislation that Justin raised, and they were going to come back on those as well as to how they differ from the bill.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, we will move on to item 8, which is oral evidence from the Department on final budget decisions 2025-26. So we'll invite the witnesses in. For members to note, at page 117 is the Clerk's memo. At page 120 is the final budget decisions covering letter. At page 123 is the committee's PFG alignment to final budget. Folks, you're very welcome at committee this afternoon. We're joined by Colin, Peter, Susan, and someone without a name tag. Yeah. So I shouldn't have started reading. I'm not
Andrew.
You're not. You're not.
Call you Andrew.
You're not Andrew. If you put that up there, you might be called Andrew. So I need committee agreement that this evidence session is recorded by Hansard. Right. And in that case, and again, firstly, apologies from the committee. The last session was mammoth. But was very important evidence from NIW regarding the bill that the committee is currently scrutinising. But I would invite you to make a brief opening statement of up to 10 minutes, and then we will have some questions for you.
Okay, thank you. So I have a short presentation here then, which I will run through, which will be no longer than 10 minutes given the time pressures as well. So, sorry, just checking it's coming through okay. Oh. That's not yet perfect. Okay, so we're here then this morning to discuss the budget, and I'll set this out in terms of the opening budget and where we are in year, and then we'll move on to discuss then and talk about the future year's budget exercise that we've just recently completed. So committee members will recall then that we launched our consultation on the Equality Impact Assessment on the draft budget, and that was back on the 6th of March 2025. That consultation ran for a total of 12-week period, and then it closed on the 5th of June. So in response to that, we received 27 returns, and they covered a range of different themes as set out there on the slide. So we had a number that came back on multiple themes. So that was a range of things such as street lighting, public transport, water. We also had 22% of those 27 returns related to community transport, around 15% around concessionary fares, 7% really around the process, on how the process operates around the EQIA, with 4% then on both road maintenance and then water and wastewater. We subsequently then published the outcome report, and that was shared then with the committee a couple of months ago. So moving on then to the final opening budget decisions. So our final opening budget is 637.1 million. So that actually represents a 77.6 or a 14% increase from last year's opening budget, and a small increase from the draft budget outcome that we consulted on. You'll see there from the pie chart that around just under 50% of the resource budget goes out to our two largest ALBs of NI Water and TransLink, with the remainder then being split between areas within the department, salaries, the water group, the climate group and public transport, and then the Tram Group as well. And our two smaller ALBs, Waterways Ireland and DVA, receiving just around 1% each. What does that look like compared to requirements? Again, the chart here will show that Transinc, just under 80% of its requirements were met, with 87% of NI Water's requirements being met as part of the opening budget decisions. You'll also then see, just to draw out, 113% of the CPPT requirements were met, and that was largely due to community transport and additional funding that went in there as part of opening budget decisions. Moving on then to capital, and this slide really focuses in on our general capital budget, so it excludes those areas that are ring-fenced. So our final opening budget then was 917 million, of which just under 550 represents the general position here. So that's at 11.8%, just under 12% increase from last year's opening, and with a small reduction from the draft budget due to changes in profiles that we anticipated as time moved on. We also then, as part of opening budget decisions, factored in capital over planning of 35.1 million. And really we did that at the start of the year to maximise our spending power throughout the year and to make sure that we were trying to get as much funding out as we could at the start of the year and plan for it accordingly as the year progresses. In relation to our ring-fenced areas, so these are elements that Minister doesn't have discretion on, so these are ring-fenced from the Executive, and they primarily focus around flagship projects, the A5, the A6 and the Belfast Transport Hub, our City Deal projects, BRT2, Lag and Pedestrian Bridge, Near East Southern Relief Road, Enniskillen, Strabane and Derry Riverfront as well. And we also had some ring-fenced Peace Plus funding in relation to the enterprise stock as well. And again, that chart just splits out the various elements of that within that ring-fenced total budget. So what does that look like in terms of requirements for capital? We'll see here that NI Water has received 86% in opening budget of what it said it could deliver this year, and that has increased to just under 90 after June monitoring. Transinc up there around 89% of what it indicated that it could receive this year. And again, the department receiving about 3/4 of what it indicated it could be receiving in relation to the transport and road asset group. And that includes both our ring-fenced and our general capital allocations. In terms of June monitoring, just thought it would be helpful to update the committee on June monitoring. I know written briefing was previously prepared after the outcome, but just helpful just to set out where we are, sort of the outcome for that. Again, the bids that we submitted, a number of those were met, totalling 6.1 million. We got 1.8 for the road drainage charge, which goes to NI Water, 1.3 for DVA, and then a total of 3 in relation to the increased employers' national insurance contributions that came into effect from the start of this financial year, and that was against a total pressure of 12 million. We also then received the commitment that was agreed as final budget, which I've alluded to there already, the 4.3 million. And moving on then to capital, we declared an easement at that stage in relation to the A5 of 16.7. Again, that was ring-fenced and not within Minister's discretion to reallocate. In terms of bids that we received 11 million, which went to NI Water for increasing wastewater capacity, 1 million then for health and safety, local transport safety measures, and a further 3.4 then for the A1 junctions as well. And again, we received further funding in relation to the commitments that were made as part of final budgeting, 0.4 for the ring-fenced transformation funding and a 1 million general allocation. And that has since then reduced our over-planning commitment that I previously mentioned down to 34 million. That really covers in year in terms of where we are in year. Moving on then to the future years exercise. So we expect this to be a multi-year exercise, which will be the Executive's first multi-year budget in over a decade. In terms of resource then, departments were asked to plan on the basis of a rolled forward resource baseline. So that's taking our baseline from this current year and rolling that forward against our requirements. So we've identified then requirements, as you'll see in the slide, 750.8 million, increasing to 794 million in that third year, and then we've looked at the gap that would mean that we would have to bid for, which is 113 million, increasing then to 156.9 million in the final year, and those are the bid forms that the committee will have received already details of. Finally then on capital, so capital we're planning for a 4-year multi-year budget, resources 3, so we're planning for 4, slightly longer on the capital side. Again, 1.3 million we've identified for 26-27, increasing to 2.3 billion in that final fourth year. And capital is slightly different the way it operates compared with resource. We don't work to a baseline position, then we work on a build it up, so zero base. We start at zero and we build it up, so a slightly different approach. In terms of what we expect then for next steps, we're expecting then a draft multi-year budget will be presented to the executive at some stage around autumn, and then we expect the finance minister will consult for a 12-week period on that, and then following which a final budget will be agreed, following which minister then will take decisions. So that's a very quick run through of the information that has been provided to you so far in terms of opening remarks. So happy to take questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Susan, for that. And you're all very welcome at the committee. I'll ask you a couple of questions, and I'm going to pass on to the Deputy Chair and then open it up to committee members. If I could take you first just to the 25-26 final opening capital budget. And I suppose the figure that we have here is 917 in terms of that. How, are you on target to spend that, or where are you in terms of progress towards that figure in terms of overall spend?
Yes, I'll maybe take it at an overall level first of all, but absolutely we're on target to spend the full budget that we've been allocated this year. Absolutely across all of the various areas we do expect to fully spend out on that, and we are working with our over planning amount as well. So yes, we are doing as much as we can on capital.
Can I take you then to again, it's the same table that I referenced there. It's ring fence funding on flagship A5, and it's down as 181.7. How close are you to spending that?
So on this one, I'll maybe hand over to Colin, if that's okay.
So
Thank you.
for the majority of projects, that's not an issue. Obviously, the A5 is the exception there, where we had planned to be in construction by now, and there's a significant budget allocation provided for that. So we're working through the process of providing figures back to the Department of Finance on what the reduced requirement will be, taking account of the delay to the project.
Do you know, Colin, what that figure would be?
So I'm just not quite sure where it's reached in the decision-making process, but I would expect somewhere in the region of 60 million is the requirement for this year, rather than the 165 that was the opening position.
So we had there's a figure kicking around of 90.5. I'm not sure if you recognise that figure.
Not specifically, but it's in the ballpark of what I would understand.
Of money that probably won't be used on the A5, and this is going to be just a thing I want to explore briefly. My understanding is that a portion of the A5 of that 181 funding comes from the Southern Government. Would that be?
That's correct. Yeah. An element of that is from Shared Island funding.
Shared Island? Yeah. Do you know what percentage roughly that is? What percentage of Shared Island goes to that 181? I'm heading towards finding out how much comes from the executive, by the way, but you may have that figure.
So the Department of Finance manage that aspect of the relationship, and then we simply get an allocation. So with that caveat, somewhere in the region of half the money this year was to be coming from the Shared Island Fund. Now, given that the project hasn't proceeded to construction in line with what we had expected, we're working through what that means exactly for the money that comes back to the centre. Obviously, some portion of that is Shared Island funding, and that's unlikely to be available for reallocation.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that of that figure of 181, there'll be some unspent? And of that figure of the unspent money, some of it will go back to the Southern Government, and some will be executive funding that I would imagine, because it's ring fenced, you'll have to send back to the centre. Would that be all okay so far? Yep.
Correct,
yeah. So would you expect, or would you be bidding perhaps on that if there is a monitoring round? I mean, do you have any indication whether there will be a monitoring round in October or not?
So at this stage, there is no indication of when the next monitoring round will be. However, we do stand ready to bid quite strongly for additional capital as and when that is launched and issued. We do have a good track record of spending a lot of capital as the year progresses. So we are absolutely ready to do that. Again, it'll be based on Minister's decisions, but yes, we would.
what level of confidence would you have if, say, of that figure, if that figure is 90, do you know how much has been spent? Sorry, did you sell it on the way through? How much has actually been spent on the A5?
So the requirement for the year is about 65 million.
Okay.
So that's what we expect to spend this year. Now, that's quite an uncertain figure because we have live legal proceedings, we have ongoing discussions with landowners. So, but that's our estimate requirement.
That's fine, and I'm not looking for exact figures by any stretch of the imagination. It might leave 100 if it's that ballpark. You're talking about 120 being left. You're going to assume from what I've gained so far from your evidence, you're probably talking about maybe 50% heading back to the south, perhaps, which leaves a figure of 60 million probably that might then head back to the centre. Is there have you done any scoping as to if there was a monitoring round and that figure returned to DFI, what that might be used for, given the fact it came from DFI in the first place? It'll be up to DOF to obviously attribute, but have you any idea about how that'd be prioritised?
So I think on the first point, I think that estimate is high without being able to give you a precise number. I think it's more like 30 rather than 60. But I think, as Susan has said, yes, we would be ready to bid at any point that funding becomes available for reallocation. We would have the ability to bid for and spend
in year on capital. Yeah, I understand that. That's fine. If I go, I've just got a technical question that came up from the last session. We got some evidence around from NI Water, and they had mentioned that the department had been successful, your department had been successful in the Public Sector Transformation Fund process, and that they had a successful bid for Natural Solutions. They didn't actually say this, but I did ask them questions and they agreed this was the case. Natural Solutions Urban Drainage, which must be, is that capital? I'm guessing it is. Yeah. So for 25-26, figure that I'm looking at here, which is from DOF, is £375,000 for that year. Does that appear in the table I'm looking at, which is 25-26 final opening capital budgets?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you're looking at. If it's a briefing that we have given you,
I think so. Did that come from?
Yes, it did.
That came from DFI. Okay.
Yeah, so that's we're looking at the same.
25-26 final opening capital budget, Susan?
That would be in the line Department Sustainable Drainage, so that will be included within that line.
Got it.
It's a small amount in this year, and then it ramps up in the later years.
Okay, so that figure of 3 million, according to what I'm looking at here, the figure that's coming from DOF is 375,000 for this year. Now, you can't see this table, obviously, but I'm just reading off a DOF table, which is saying spending profile, transformation funding requirement. And for DFI, under Natural Solutions Urban Drainage, it does say 375,000, but that's incorporated into that figure of 3 million, you think?
That will be in that line, yeah.
It's fine, absolutely fine, okay. That's fine. And final question for me just is under the, again, Northern Ireland Water, the figure, they have a figure of 350 million, and we think that includes RRI borrowing at just over £100 million, 105.7. You may recognise that figure. Does the department plan to, does it plan or does it have any intention to increase RRI borrowing in terms of Northern Ireland Water? Is the first question.
Okay, so that would not be within our remit to determine that. So RRI borrowing is agreed and determined by the executive, and that is managed by DOF. So as part of opening budget, the full amount of RRI borrowing that could be drawn down this year was included in opening budgets. I think 105 was to NI Water, as you mentioned, 20 then to education for schools, and 100 million then to housing. So that's already been committed for this year as part of the opening budget decisions. So we wouldn't have any more flexibility even to go and engage with DOF to see if that could be increased further, given they're maxed out at the top line.
Okay, and my understanding is that in order to decrease that figure, that's a negotiation that the executive has with Treasury. Is that right? Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, folks. I'll hand over to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, folks, for coming along. Just a couple of questions, first of all, on the arm's length bodies. We heard last week from Transitional about their concerns about the shortfall in budgets. I'm just wondering, I'm sure you recognise them. What chats have you had with them about the potential impact of those costs? And given the lack of money forthcoming in monitoring rounds, should we be concerned? I know they put in previously for 19.4 million and June got 1 million. So if that was repeated, there could be serious shortcomings there.
Yeah, I'll take that question. Yes, so we are working closely with Transitional on their budget. We've been working with them throughout the year, looking at their financial position and the allocation from the department. So they've already taken some steps to try and manage that financial position in terms of looking at cost reductions, etc., and also trying to increase revenue for us. Since then, we are continuing to engage with Translink to reflect their current position and what other measures they and us can do to try and mitigate that. So that means going back and looking at efficiency savings within Translink, how they can increase their revenue, but then also working with the colleagues within the department and DOF, looking at can we secure additional funding from DOF as part of any future monitoring round. So again, continue to work closely with Translink to try and manage that situation.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Takes me to my next point there, and you talked about Translink's attempts at efficiency savings. Can I ask what directives either the Minister or the Permanent Secretary has made on the Directorates of the Department of Infrastructure to find in-house efficiency savings? And if so, what have been made this year compared to previous years?
I suppose in terms of efficiencies, we have budget allocations and we're working to live and deliver services within those. So we're given an amount to work to and then deliver our services within those rather than sort of efficiency targets as such. Appreciate
that. I suppose other ministers may well have asked arm's length bodies or departments internally to find ways of internal collaboration to show that ensure that work wasn't being duplicated or that teams could work together. I'm just asking what either the Minister or the Permanent Secretary has asked the department to do to find savings within the department rather than to live the budgets. It's a significant budget of 1.56 billion. So even if a small percentage was to be saved, that could be impactful across the department. So to that end, what efficiency savings have been made by the department?
I think what really underpins us as a department as we try to move forward is that, yeah, we work to a budget that doesn't fully meet our needs, but we live within that budget, as Susan rightly says, and cut our cloth accordingly. But within that as well, we also look at trying to be more innovative, and you'll have heard, for instance, when Dennis and Minister was up a few months ago about the foundations and how that was looking at how we could do work better, differently and such like. We also try to exploit the opportunities through IT, and we try to, as the Chair has mentioned earlier, look at opportunities through the Transformation Fund. So we're always looking at opportunities to make savings and make efficiencies, and we're always looking at ways to do things better, differently going forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Just within the capital spend then, if it might come to that, you said with the exception of the A5, we'll probably get a report back in that column about the final figure within this year. Belfast Transport Hub is assigned for 39.9 million. That money's almost complete. Is that just final aspects of the project, or are there still aspects of that's still being spent? Does that include the works around it, for example, and the streetscaping, etc.?
Yeah, that total is for the project in its entirety,
okay,
including the station and the public realm works in and around the station.
That's due to be complete. That money will be spent within the 25-26 year?
That money will be spent within this financial year. There is a tail next year, so the station itself substantially complete next summer is the target. Operationally, it's almost there.
Okay, thank you. My final aspect for now is just around active travel. I don't see a specific line for active travel, but I'm conscious that it's 10% ring fenced. So what is the figure for active travel? What percentage of the active travel 10% has been spent from the previous year? And it's back to the point I continually make. If it's allocated and ring fenced specifically for active travel, how can we as a committee ensure that it's being spent properly and not, I don't want to use the word squandered at the end, but being forced to be spent rather than being spent in the projects that matter?
So the active travel spend is disaggregated across a number of areas, and that simply reflects what it's spent on. So as you'll know, we have dedicated active travel infrastructure construction.
Yes.
So we have a budget line for the Belfast Cycle Network. We have a budget line for sustainable travel grants, which largely go to councils to fund greenway development and so on. So at any point, we're comfortable that we can provide the committee with a briefing on where that money sits within that chart of accounts and how we manage it. Now, how we're managing it is based on what it is, and the difficulty sometimes of knowing in advance what proportion is a reasonable proportion of, say, footpath maintenance or footpath construction to assign to the active travel target. So, as the department has set out previously, we have taken a working definition of what active travel is. We looked at the activities the department was carrying out that are for the benefit of pedestrians and people who are cycling and walking, wheeling, cycling. And we've ascribed a value, for example, from street lighting, from structural maintenance when it comes to footpaths, recognising that it is active travel work. It's not the same as segregated new construction, but we believe it's a legitimate way to describe it. So the total percentage, and forgive me, I don't have the exact percentage in my mind, but we're roughly between 5 and 6% of the transport budget this year expecting to be spent on active travel. We're absolutely not in the space of simply trying to shovel money towards active travel without regard to the value of that. Every pound we spend, we intend to bring value for money, and we're happy that all of the money that we intend to spend this year would be in that, definitely in that category.
And I appreciate how complex it must be, Colin, because you have a multitude of factors that factor into what active travel is. But I suppose from a scrutiny point of view, it's quite difficult to pin down aspects of it. So there's actually no line specifically for active travel, is what you're saying. So whenever
there
it comes
isn't one
to
single budget line,
either capital or resource. So when it comes to the directorate, for example, how do they go about assessing their spend on their projects if they don't know, for example, how much there is to spend? I'm sorry if I'm not wording this right.
No,
it's a complicated beast. I'm just trying to work it out in my head, how they go about ensuring which projects get the go-ahead, how they know that there's money for those projects.
Yeah. So the majority of new construction of active travel infrastructure is delivered through our active travel team.
Yes.
They manage that centrally. They take a program management approach to that.
Okay.
So when you look at the budget lines for the active travel grants for work on the road network, there's an oversight role delivered by Colin Hutchison, who's the director of the A5 and active travel, and he has a team of staff who manage that program of work as a program. When it comes then to ascribing parts of costs towards active travel, so for example, I believe the figure we're using on street lighting is 50% of street lighting we're ascribing as active travel. Now, you could argue that it depends very much on the street light, but we think that's a reasonable assumption. That money goes to our street lighting team because they have to pay the electric bill for the street lights and carry out the maintenance for those. So that's where it starts to then become harder to put it all in one line, because we know we have to pay the street light bill whether we ascribe it to active travel or not.
Yes.
And that's a very simplistic description, but that's essentially why parts of that budget aren't separated out. At any point, we're comfortable that we can separate that out, and certainly happy to write to the committee with what that looks like lifted out of the 25-26 budget allocations and what we anticipate being the active travel total for the year, assuming nothing changes at monitoring rounds.
So my final point in this, Chair, and apologies, call my little brains doing somersaults, but effectively you're statutory obligated to spend 10% on active travel, but it's currently between 4.5% and 6% potentially. But if you could spend it, you would spend it. So what happens if you do spend it? Where does that 4.5% then come from that's not being spent elsewhere? And then year on year, are you going to have to apply for additional funding to fill up the gap that's going to be spent on active travel? That's, I suppose, where I'm trying to get to.
So we recognise the 10% duty,
yeah,
and we have set out plans to grow how much we spend year on year so that we're delivering that by 2030.
Okay.
In part, that reflects our capacity to actually spend money, well and wisely,
yes,
and in part, it reflects the fact that, similar to a major road scheme, an active travel scheme can take 3 to 4 years to go through the development process, particularly when we need to vest land in order to construct it. So we see that ramping up to 10% over time. It's unlikely that we would get much additional funding, so the statutory duty didn't come with additional funding, so it's 10% of the transport budget as it ends up being that year, and that's one of the reasons why it's hard to say in advance at exactly when you think you're going to hit that. It really requires us to look at what was spent that year, work out 10% and compare that to what we plan to spend. So at the minute we are planning to grow that spending over the years so that we're delivering the 10% target with good value for money, positive benefit schemes by 2030.
I had one more, Chair, but I'll come back at the end if you want.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Sure. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Deputy Chair. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of keeping on that sort of the active travel theme there, although I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole. you mentioned there a brief on the assignment of the active travel spend. Can that be shared? Can that be made available?
So we can write to the committee and provide a briefing, and I'm happy that officials could also come if that was of interest.
Okay, thank you very much. Just I suppose really, we've seen asked for on budget, and there's like 10-11% discrepancy there sometimes. I think it was Translink. Translink were in last week, and it was stark really. And reference was made to the monitoring rounds that are going to be forthcoming. What is the view on, will monitoring rounds be coming forward? Is that likely to happen again? And what are the real life impacts in the view of the department should they not be coming forward?
So again, normally we would have 3 monitoring rounds each year. This year, however, the October monitoring round hasn't yet been commissioned, and that'll be a decision for the Finance Minister and DF officials then to commission that at the appropriate time. And once that is commissioned, we will obviously feed into that and bid for where we know our pressures are, subject to ministerial decisions on those, including the likes of Translink and structural maintenance and other things that we know that we're working with pressures at the moment. So again, normally there would be a further monitoring round after October in December, January as well. So we're still looking ahead to those monitoring rounds when they happen.
Okay. Going back again, it's sort of linking it into NI Water. NI Water were just in. The department commissioned a forensic review of NI Water spending. And again, reading the report, didn't appear to find any areas of which substantial savings could have been made. But yet, the opening remarks stated that the final opening budget fell short of both resource and capital that had been identified for Northern Ireland Water. And I'm just conscious or curious, can there any comment be made on the likelihood of this implication for any or for a potential other overspend for NI Water in this coming financial year?
So Andrew, Northern Ireland Water submitted an operating plan, which they do every year, to the department, which we scrutinised, worked closely with them on. They subsequently submitted a further updated version of that a few months later to take account of the budget allocation and changing conditions that have happened in the year. But an amount of money that Northern Ireland Water would set aside when their budget at the start of the year would be for weather events. It's based on worst case scenario, Those that haven't happened, the weather episodes, thank goodness. And if they do, we can bid for that money when needed. So as we sit today on the resource side, there is a slight gap between what Northern Ireland Water feel they need to the end of the year and what we have allocated. However, the Chief Executive wrote to the Permanent Secretary recently to say, in the context of the pay award, that she's satisfied that the pay award is affordable, and by dint of that she can deliver the services. If there are any pressing events that happen due to weather episodes or such like, she would bid to the department. So on the resource, they believe they can live within that as we sit today. And on the capital, as you know, they sent in an operating plan that said 405 million. We've allocated 361. They're confident that they can spend what is in effect 89% of what they've asked for this year.
Okay. Just again, following up on that, given the increasing regularity of extreme weather events that we've seen, you touched on that. I suppose, what is the wider view of the department on the 5.4 million allocation and how that will be used? What's the view on that going forward?
Sorry, can I just double check the 5.4 allocation?
Yeah.
Is that on information? It's the flood risk management figure, is it? Potentially you're referring to in resource?
As he checks notes.
Okay, so that's specifically in relation to the managing the risk of flooding.
Okay.
And that is effectively the routine maintenance that will be carried out so that if there is adverse weather, that we're more prepared to manage it.
Obviously Translink raised that as an issue too. There's a motion next week as well on the resilience of infrastructure to respond to adverse weather. Is there a wider context needs to be discussed about this? Is there more ring-fenced funding needs to be made available in response to, we've had in the calendar year now, we've had Storm Aidan, we've had Storm Amy, Yeah,
Andrew, this week is Flood Action Week, as you probably will know, and the point of that is to heighten awareness that we're living in an environment now that is prone to more storms and more weather episodes. So what we're trying to do is enable people to get more on the front foot so that they're more aware and alive of the problems coming down the track, and that we can work closely with them and get in earlier and intervene earlier, such as clearing culverts, gullies, etc. And we saw that to good effect a few weeks ago with Storm Amy, when staff were out on the ground from as early as the Thursday ahead of the storm that came in on the Friday, to make sure that we cleared as much as possible, given that the leaves were continuing to fall off trees, etc. But so I think we're taking a much more proactive approach, and I think that's borne out for even the work that's been developed on the flood forecasting centre, etc. So I think the infrastructure family is more alert and alive to it, not least because we've had a number of incidents now in recent years. So our preparedness is better.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Andrew, just before I bring Harry in, I think we're living in a world where both presentations are amalgamated, the budget final decisions and the spending review budget sustainability plan, if that's the understanding of the officials. There's nodding going on there to try and bring us some way back on track. So just to make members aware of that, I think that's a territory we're in. Harry.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good to see you all. In terms of the DVA question, just around it, if the new supercentre or centres eventually do get open, how will that affect costs when it does happen? I mean, are they expected to be profitable, or will the costs increase? Do you know?
So in relation to DVA, it has a slightly different status in public sector. It's referred to as a trading fund. So really the requirement there is for it just to break even and manage effectively its own costs year on year.
So it'll just basically stay.
That's the way
same.
it should be.
Yeah.
That's the way it should operate in practice.
Even with the new centres and if they need new staff, yeah. Good answer. Okay, thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you very much. Harry, I will therefore bring Justin in. Justin.
Sure, thanks folks. Just, I'm sorry if I missed this when I was out there. The department has allocated 5.4 million for central corporate charges. What does that relate to?
So that's a range of corporate charges that we are required to pay other government departments, such as Department of Finance, for effectively things like HR, IT, central services that they deliver to all departments.
In terms of the roads maintenance budgets, 52.2 million. How's that compared to last year?
For essential maintenance,
yeah.
So we're expecting an increase on last year's essential maintenance budget from a resource perspective. So we're hoping that allows us then to be a bit more proactive through the winter in particular.
So you've got an uplift from last year?
A small uplift, yes.
And what, percentage-wise, what is that compared to what you actually need?
So we need somewhere in the region of 66, 67 million on essential maintenance, and I think 56 was the opening allocation this year. 52, thank you. And out of that, then that's why we have our limited service policy on essential maintenance, because we can't afford to deliver the normal maintenance service that would take the full 66. And then we also have to absorb costs related to weather events and so on, similar to what Northern Ireland Water would have to do.
On the F5, obviously, the project stalled, but significant money still being spent. What is your forecast for the money being spent for the coming year, given that the project has stalled?
I believe it's in the region of about 60 million, and that reflects costs that were incurred in preparation for construction, and then other costs from now on in terms of the dealings with landowners that the department's engaged in, and also the legal costs of taking the appeal to the Court of Appeal.
So without a shovel in the ground next year, potentially you still will spend 60 million?
I mean, technically it did involve some shovels in the ground for the advanced works, so forgive me. But yes, I take your point. We had intended to be in construction of the main scheme this year, and that would have started in the summer, and it's disappointing that we aren't. It means that we're going to spend something in the region of 100 million less than we anticipated. But yes, there are still costs being incurred. It's one of the reasons why the department was disappointed, obviously, by the judgment, in part because delay to the project incurs additional cost. And it would be better to get on and get the value of the main construction and spend the money on that, and that would absolutely have been our preference.
Yeah, and to what extent are you concerned that stalling project is going to have a knock-on effect on multiple other projects, which then has a knock-on effect in terms of your ability to spend money that you have been allocated, and where does that end?
Yeah, so it's difficult to know where it ends exactly until we get the judgment from the Court of Appeal. I think, as I said a couple of weeks ago, we have a wide range of scenarios that could be the outcome of that appeal, ranging from reinstating the original decision to proceed to leaving the judgment exactly as it was at the High Court, or something different. It's very difficult to work out what the implications of the judgment will be until we know what it is. So, as the Minister has said, nothing being left off the table in terms of exploring the options and trying to prepare for a range of scenarios that could come from that judgment.
Implications actually could be catastrophic and far-reaching in terms of our roads construction industry.
Certainly it's possible to see a scenario where roads construction remains very difficult and very challenging, and you would expect that would impact our ability to spend and to progress the schemes that we want to progress. That's one of the possible outcomes, yes.
Very, very worrying times for you as a department.
We would prefer to be in construction on the A5, certainly, and as I say, disappointing that we're not.
Thank you very much, Justin. Nicola.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again for the officials for coming in here this afternoon. Just back to that point with A5, and I said the same yesterday. The reality is that the reason this project has been delayed is because of legal objections, and the department and ourselves would rather see this here project being progressed for all the multitude of reasons that we've outlined previously. So I just don't think it's very helpful to have this here narrative about the cost whenever we actually are all in agreement that the project should be moved forward. But I just wanted to ask a few questions about the budget. Obviously this is Community Transport Week, and I see there's mentioned there £1 million investment into community transport from the Minister. Can anyone there explain to me the benefit that this will have for the work that, the very, very important work that those within the community transport actually do?
I didn't pick up the question there.
Just what kind of impact that this £1 million investment will have on community transport services throughout the north?
Nicola, my hearing wasn't great there. I suppose I think we all welcome the Minister's additional just over £1 million allocation to community transport this year. That brings the allocation to about 5.5 million. In terms of outputs, a lot of that additional cost or additional funding was trying to cover additional costs that community transport providers were incurring. You know, they had inflation, you had minimum wage, you also had national insurance contributions. So all of that needed to be covered as part of that additional allocation. Last year and the previous years, we're looking at around about 250,000 passenger journeys or trips. We're not quite sure what the outcome will be this year. The allocation went to community transport in the summer. They're working through that there. We would expect there to be an additional number of trips, but we're not able to quantify that just at this stage.
That's okay. Even the fact, I suppose, that it means that the whole service should be more sustainable because of those national insurance hikes, that type of thing. That additional investment should make the whole service more sustainable. So that's good. I finally want to touch upon the other £1 million that's been invested in regards to the All Ireland Rail Review. I know this was discussed in the Assembly this week as well, and obviously people want to see it progress. So can you provide me with any more information on that, please?
Sure. So in order to take forward the All Ireland State Rail Review, there's a number of different strands taking that forward. So the department is working with their colleagues in DOT, looking at the prioritisation of the projects within the strategy and how they could be taken forward in future years, looking primarily to the next 10 years, what can be progressed. That prioritisation is likely to be published this side of Christmas, and that will sort of set the direction of travel. In parallel with that, the department and Transitional have been taking forward a number of feasibility studies in and around electrification from Belfast to Dublin, and also some feasibility studies in terms of Portadown to Armagh, Portadown to Derry, and the Napier link. In order to continue work on those feasibility studies, the Minister's ring-fenced £1 million of the capital programme budget this year to enable Transitional to take forward those particular projects to the next stage. It doesn't bring them to you would call it the next milestone, but enables work to continue on those projects.
No, that's fair enough, and that's obviously very important to have the research there and the data there for whenever it does come to a later stage. And so we'll wait for that prioritisation paper too before Christmas. That's helpful. Thank you all, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Okay, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks, for your presentation again. Just a couple of issues. The Reservoir Act, over the last year, we've had quite a number of people in briefing us in relation to that, and there's quite a bit of concern within the sector and internally from DFI, around the scale of some of the challenges around that. So could you just tell me a wee bit more around the allocation around that in terms of funding and any, particularly for the grant scheme? Are we at that stage yet?
No, not at that. We're not quite at that stage yet.
Yeah.
So in terms of the funding, there's no funding factored in, but definitely give an update.
So Stephen, we're working on a business case for it, but there's a bit of a chicken and egg about this insofar as until and unless the legislation is fully enacted and the 5 pieces in particular that the committee would have heard about, you can't enact the grant scheme. One follows the other because it's about inspection and you have to give cover for it to allow us to do that. So we are doing the work behind the scenes. We continue to do the work on the business case and we look to see what that entails for the inspection process. But as I say, it'll only go so far until we have the Act over the line. So we need the Act to move over the line is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. It is certainly an important issue. So many issues are. Just going back to the A5, I know I don't want to open it up because we could be here all week or more on it, but in terms of, I suppose, the judgment that's before us and the appeal and so on, looking wider term around infrastructure, has there been any assessment done yet in terms of the impact on other projects at this stage?
Yeah, so obviously every other project is proceeding down a particular timeline, and when we get to decision points, absolutely having to understand, well, what are the implications of the A5 judgment and what might the implications be from the appeal judgment are a very relevant part of that decision making process. So yes, the department and the minister will be taking that into account whenever decision points are reached.
Yeah, and as the road is still in the dangerous condition it's in today, any of that money that has been allocated, could that be used as a more interim measure, given the ongoing legal action, which is going to be at least into next year, before that decision can be made? Has there been any progress on that?
Yeah, so we do maintenance on the existing A5 every year.
Yeah.
So we do resurfacing schemes. We attempt to introduce safety upgrades where we believe that those are justified and proportionate. We don't believe that any combination of those is as good as building a new offline dual carriageway with the safety benefits in particular that will bring. But we are still looking at the existing road and all the roads that we're responsible for in terms of what is the sensible intervention that we can make now with the budget that we've got. Certainly if there is additional budget available for reallocation, as we've said earlier, we'll be making strong bids for how that can be spent on road maintenance across the network.
Yeah, just if we hope the October monitoring round does come forward, is there a top 3 that you would say within your department? Can you tell us what they would be, or is that too premature?
That would be a decision for the minister ultimately to take.
Give us thinking about it.
When you think about the scale of, I'll just speak about road maintenance.
Yeah.
The opening budget for structural maintenance was around about 1/3 of the requirement, so just maybe not quite as low as that, but close to it. All of our teams across the network have schemes sitting ready to go if there was funding available. We don't wait for the to identify what the scheme would look like and to advance it to the stage of delivery. We could be on the ground in days if there was additional budget for structural maintenance right across the network. So it's probably easier to give you the top 300 rather than the top 3 in that sense. But
no, and just final point on the road safety advertising. I think it's welcome to see the increase in that 1.9 from the department, then topped up with the additional 500 from the road safety partnership. And I think there is evidence to show when the most has been spent on advertising, the deaths have correlated with that. So I think that's certainly an important point to note. So thank you, folks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I don't think John, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, Chair. Some of the questions I think have strayed into the gathering exercise. Are we going to do that as a separate piece?
So I was going to just make that point, John. There's also the sustainability spending review piece that is later on. It's running around page 170, 172 to 179. I think the intention is to have it all together. So if any members have any questions around that particular piece, I'm going to start with John because I sense he has one.
Well, the first one was just one I didn't come to in my original remarks. And I'm not sure if you can even address it today, Susan, it's probably for yourself. Is there an assessment of the value and the amount of outstanding land that DFI currently own that's been previously vested in order to deliver projects? And I say this, for example, to my constituency, both the A2 and the A8 took significant chunks of land, and there are now abandoned houses, some 15 years on, sitting there. I assume they're under the ownership of DFI. They have a commercial value. They would tidy up the area and would free much needed resources to the department. How regularly is that looked at, and what is the assessed value across the country of that land?
Yeah, so I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but
Okay.
certainly it is valued every year and would form part of our valuation within our annual accounts, but we can certainly write back with that figure.
Yeah, because I know the constituents who live along that patch would like to see those houses regenerated, sold, and maybe invest that money in the roads. That would be a nice little Brucey bonus.
From a policy perspective, we don't seek to hold on to that land. Once the scheme is constructed, it then moves through the normal disposal process. Now that can take a time, and there's a number of prescriptions on what we need to do in order to dispose of government land. But as Susan says, the value of it is assessed regularly. Yeah.
It's just seemingly, for some reason, gone taking quite a significant period of time, particularly in the A2. That was done 2015.
Yep.
We're 10 years on, there's still blighted houses sitting there, so that would be a nice assessment. Just in terms of, are we moving on then to the next stage, Chair? Do you want to? I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. No, I had maybe just one more question on this, and then we'll see if any. I mean, this was probably the meat of it all, but there is the sort of spending review piece as well. Just in terms of this, to tie it off. I think it's my understanding from the presentation you showed us, Susan, and you just get me if I'm wrong, in terms of 24, 25, 25, 26 budgets, resource went up 14%-ish and capital went up 12. Do those figures ring a bell? Is that right? How that was allocated, because I know that sometimes finance ministers can do this a range of ways. When, in terms of this year's 25, 26, did the department get a total figure and then were instructed by DOF to spend it any way they wanted, or did DOF give you, apart from leaving aside the ring fence stuff, but did DOF give you breakdown budgets as to where it expected you to spend?
No, so in resource it's a general allocation, and then it's for ministers to decide on how they allocate that within their own internal departments.
That's fine.
Yep.
Just in terms of that resource and that figure of 14%, again, it's maybe a bit of a stretchy question for you. So that's an uplift of 14% on 24-25. In terms of how you or the minister approach the allocation process for that, were there any priorities that you identified in terms of where that additional spend went into, or was it averaged across a range of spending areas?
So again, it would be based on ministers' priorities, and we would have presented minister with the full requirements across each business area, and then decisions have been taken by minister then on where to allocate that to and fund.
So would it be fair to say, if I got out my calculator and looked at the 24-25 opening resource budget and the 25-26 opening resource budget and looked at the differential between what those figures are, I would be able to identify what the minister's spending priorities are?
You'll be able to identify where spend was allocated to. Obviously there's a number of contractual commitments that we have to meet as well.
Inescapables?
Exactly.
Got it, yeah.
Things that are like our contractual PPP commitments or electricity, things like that we have to meet. Again, so that would need to factor into that as well.
You'll be glad to know I didn't do that calculation there, because otherwise I'd just read it out to you and I would find out where the minister's priorities were. But that is useful in itself. It's maybe just a note that actually, in terms of the uplift from last year, that, you know, an average of 13% isn't too bad. I understand the particular pressures that DFI are under. If I just ask, I've got a couple of questions on the spending review, and then any other, I'm going to start off with John, and then anyone else who has any questions on that, which is the last piece, but we are heading towards a level of time pressure now. So I'm on page 172 for any members who want to follow it. Yep. So essentially, these aren't real figures. This is effectively what the department is likely to bid for, or what I think are inescapable or high priority items for the future. Between, I think, is it 26 to 29? Is that right? Yeah, it is 26 to 29. I mean, the first question is maybe just a silly one on my part. the table has 26 bids on it, okay? And obviously, I have a little bit of a departmental experience, and you've got the inescapables and high priority items listed there. But they're not ordered by inescapable and high priority. I was just a little bit surprised to see inescapables at 19 and 20. Is there a reason, and it's certainly not aligned in terms of alphabetical order, is there any reason for how this table came about and the order it's in?
Well, I suppose in terms of the specific elements you identified there, the Bear Scotland liability and the department's pay award, the Bear Scotland liability will be inescapable at the point in time that it crystallises. And again, it's a timing uncertainty that we're recognising here. So it's uncertain as to when it will crystallise. We know it will become inescapable at that point in time, but we're currently not there yet. So it was a bit of a difficult one to categorise, but that's how we've presented it. So we know we've continually, again, made the case that we don't have the funding for it. We'll seek additional funding when it does crystallise too.
And I assume that the same is for item 20, which is the department's pay awards?
So in relation to pay awards, so historically what we've done is we've had to effectively manage pay award within existing allocations. So again, it will be inescapable because it becomes a contractual commitment and staff are entitled to it. However, from a budget perspective, what we've said is we will manage that within allocations, usually through staff churn, etc. And that's how we try to manage it. So it will be inescapable, but we will try to manage it within existing allocations.
Okay. And just going back to item 19, what on earth is the department's Bear Scotland liability?
So that's in relation to a legal case in relation to holiday pay, effectively. It's due.
It's in relation to?
Holiday pay, sorry.
Holiday pay,
yeah.
Fine, okay. I'm just checking this out. John, do you want to go ahead if you have any questions?
Just a couple of points, and it's nice to see this. I'm sure you're glad to start having preparations for a 3-year multi-budget. We've talked about it for long enough, and I know it'll become really advantageous as we go forward. In terms of the figures that have been assigned then, whether we look at winter service or essential roads maintenance, probably one for yourself again, Colin, I feel like I'm picking on you, is that a fully funded or a limited service at this stage that you are bidding for at that stage?
What we're doing, we're setting out what the requirement is, and that's for a fully funded service. Okay. And you can see as well on capital, it assumes that that the requirement for structural maintenance is up around the 200 million a year, and that's why on the graph that Susan had in the presentation, there's a sharp increase towards the end of that.
Yes,
we await the executive's consideration of the budget. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Within where would the likes of gully and drain clearing come? Is it in essential roads maintenance or is it in flood risk management?
So most of that from a roads perspective would be in essential maintenance. It can also be part of structural maintenance, depending on whether we're having to just repair something or construct a new culvert or a new gully. So it can be spread between those two, but the majority of our gully emptying is in essential maintenance. It's resource spend.
Okay, because whether it's been decided upon, there is a reduced service undoubtedly with gully clearing.
There is. So at the minute, under limited service, we aim to clean every gully once a year, supplemented with targeted gully cleaning ahead of weather events and in response to flooding. We know that in an ideal world you would be doing a much more significant risk-based programme, which would see some gullies being cleaned 12 times a year and others once might be appropriate. That's part of what moving up from a limited service to a normal maintenance service would entail, and that's what some of that additional funding would be used for.
I hate to be local on it, but would you do me a favour and take this away? Whenever the Storm Amy came, both the A8 in Larne and the Shore Road flooded again for the third storm in a row. I was given assurances that the gullies and drains were cleared, but they had not been. So these are obviously areas that are flagging up, particularly the Shore Road that leads into the sea. It was blatantly obvious the road was closed because they hadn't been cleared. Could you maybe just someone take that back and maybe find out why that's not happening, or had it been an oversight?
It can happen for lots of reasons, so I doubt that they would have claimed to have cleaned it if they hadn't. But obviously material can move, so leaves and other silt and everything else can be washed into them and block them again. So it's possible to clean a gully out one day and to come back 3 days later and it could do with being cleaned again. So that may have happened. And obviously in weather events there's a lot more water flowing and a lot more force, and it moves a lot more material around, so that could be the reason. But yes, we'll look into both of those.
Appreciate that. I take it in that respect then, it's back to this point that those roads that are more likely to flood and to block and are more heavily used are done more often than the once a year target.
Yes. So typically when we know there's a weather warning coming, for example, section officers will go to known areas of flooding risk and target additional gully cleaning to try and make sure that the gullies are in the best state possible to cope. Now, you get to a point where, depending on the severity of the weather event, our gullies aren't designed to cope with the once in 500 years level of water. They're designed to tolerate sort of a normal, reasonable case, so there will always be the possibility that there just isn't the capacity in the drainage system to cope with a particular downpour. So occasionally that can lead to flooding, typically localised flooding that will drain away over the next few hours, but it can obviously cause an impact, and it can mean that roads need to be closed temporarily.
That's useful. The final point, I did see detail of the active travel behavioural change programme. Can you just talk us through what that entails?
Yes, so a lot of that's focused on work with schools and in conjunction with the Public Health Agency, trying to promote the health and other benefits of active travel. So,
okay. Okay, that's all from me at now.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose this is... How do you, I mean, I suppose this is very general, but the bill will be general questions. I think, how do you determine the reductions basically in what someone's asked for in budgeting and what is actually attributed again? And I hate to bring it back, but we've been here last week and we had Transitional saying they don't get what they ask for and have to rely on on in-house budget October monitoring rounds. We literally had the NI Water say we can't deliver these things because of the budgeting. So again, I just want to understand, these things get asked for, and then you guys go, well, actually, no, we can't. We're going to reduce it by this. I mean, how does that? How do you guys how does the department arrive at that?
So in relation to the information gathering exercise as commissioned by DOF, which you have the returns for, as part of that exercise, we really focused on maintaining the current level of service, and primarily that was the main. There'll be some areas of exception, as Colin's mentioned, around winter service, but that was the key sort of planning assumption at this stage. We would maintain our business as usual, our current services, and then bid for anything on top of that that we needed to do, or things maybe, I suppose, assumptions that we'd used in previous years as well. It is an exercise, so it doesn't reflect, I suppose, ministers' decisions at this stage. This is just simply a bidding exercise. And whenever we do get a draft budget and a final budget, then we would work that through in a lot more detail to really sit with minister and prioritise those things then at that stage.
Okay. I suppose, the inverse of that question that I'm going to ask now is in the grand scheme, and Minister Stewart sort of asked there again about sort of active travel and all. I mean, how do you attribute then the sort of external value other than just the numbers, if you get my meaning? But I mean, you talk about TransLink and active travel and sort of all the sort of add-on benefits of those. I mean, how so it's all well and good working out the reductions that something's going to have, but then how do you sit there and actually go, where is the value in this? How does the value increase? How for every, what's the multiplier effect for every money, for every pound spent? How does that arrived at?
So I think that probably comes in at a slightly earlier stage when you're trying to figure out, well, what is the requirement? So for active travel, what is the requirement? To spend 10% of the transport budget would mean somewhere in the region of 75 to 80 million. And as I've said before, we're keen to ensure that when we reach that point, we have schemes that are value for money. So typically we will look at all the things you might do, and the policy process just involves figuring out, well, what are you actually going to propose to do? Why? What's the business case for it? And as part of that, what are the benefits for it and what are the costs? That informs what the number is on the requirement. And then we sit down with the minister and we set out what the requirement is, and the minister decides on where the money needs to get allocated. It can feel like a reductions exercise because the requirement is always bigger than the amount of money available. So we don't have the luxury, unfortunately, of there's going to be an extra 100 million. What good things would we like to do with it? We already have good plans to spend more money than is going to arrive with the department, and so in practice it can feel a little bit like the minister being asked to take difficult decisions on where not to meet the full requirement because there simply isn't enough money to meet that full requirement.
Yeah. And to echo what Colin says, that will be the same across roads, NI Water, TransLink, in terms of the level of investment that can be made, that delivers value for money and will make a difference. But then that level of need or requirement is much higher than the available capital, it's likely to be higher than the available capital budget.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Very much, Andrew. Justin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks. At this stage, this is a bidding exercise, and therefore bids submitted do not reflect any budget decisions. I know ministers have been crying out for 3-year budgets now for a long, long time. Where do we actually sit? Is this a commitment to a 3-year budget, or is this just a wish list for a 3-year budget?
Again, that will be a decision for the executive. The finance minister will take a draft budget to the executive, and they will agree or not on a draft multi-year budget, and it rests then with the executive.
So we're essentially talking about a wish list here as is.
These are our requirements that we have identified and fed into that process, and again that will be taken by DOF and brought forward as a draft budget.
Well, there's no commitments made yet, but hopefully your
our expectations
your expectation is that there will be a commitment on that for 3 budget. That's your expectation. Okay, good. In terms of the equality impact under Section 75, persons with a disability. What are the implications of not proceeding with a 3-year budget for Section 75 equality impact?
So again, we will assess that as part of our equality impact assessment whenever we get our draft budget. We will look at that in detail, and again we will go out to consult as we did for the 25-26 budget process as well.
I know the Vice Chair was very parochial with one issue. I'm going to be very parochial with one issue. Irish Street in Armagh, Breedshaw, the great Breedshaw, and her husband Victor uses a wheelchair, and there is an adverse camber on the footpath, and there are drainage channels which prevent him traversing the footpath safely or at all. Could that be addressed from the Section 75 perspective? Yeah. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Justin. I haven't had any more indications from members, and so I think that probably draws this session to a close. I want to thank you folks for coming along. Sorry for the delay in getting you before committee, yeah, so committee will now consider any additional information we require, and we'll be writing out to DFI accordingly. Thanks very much, folks.
Thanks everybody, appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Right, colleagues, we just need to have a quick discussion about any actions arising from the evidence. I noted a couple. I'll bring Michael in, and then I'll take anything that we've missed. But there's a brief on active travel spend that Andrew mentioned. Yep. Nod, and that's great. And also, I suggest we write to DOF and find out from DOF if they think there's going to be a monitoring round. Although given the fact that it's only 30, 15 days to the end of the month, I think it's probably unlikely. But I think we should just, or let's write to them and maybe ask them in the first place, give them their place, is there going to be an October monitoring round? And then secondly, if there's not going to be one, why not? I think those are both reasonable questions to ask. Michael, do you have anything else that came through that we want to ask additional information on?
I didn't, no. I'll check with the department later. But
Justin,
can we seek confirmation that there will be multi-year budgets?
Yep. That won't come from infrastructure, but we can write to the Department of Finance and ask them their view on that if you're content with that. Yep. That is fine. I had one. It was a bit unsporting that they didn't give us the comparative tables. I would have liked to have seen 25, 26 and 24, 25 to see some level of comparative data. Perhaps we could ask the department for their 24, 25 both opening resource and opening capital budgets, and maybe if they want to stretch, they could even give us a percentage up, increase or decrease on those. Just simple tables. They'll have them to hand. Replications of what we have in front of us, but for 24, 25 to give me a bit of a handle as to which areas went up and down. Anyone got anything else?
Just arising out of your points, there was a good discussion on it around the A5 money.
Yep.
There's still ambiguity around this. I don't accept the premise that discussing it means that you're anti-A5. I don't think anyone in this room has ever said that.
Absolutely not.
But from an accounting point of view, it is essential that that money, if it's coming back, goes to places it needs to be targeted to.
Agreed.
I believe that we wrote to the department last week, but it might be worth seeking evidence from or advice from the Department for Finance on it as well, to get their assessment on it and where that would go, because it would be a real shame to lose it.
Would. And I wasn't entirely clear from the answers what that figure would be, although my understanding was that it seemed of the 181, about 50% of that, maybe we could include this and ask the department for some clarity around it, because it's unfair sometimes to put officials in, they can't have every figure to hand. Yeah. But my understanding was about half was money coming from the Republic of Ireland. I think I sensed that in terms of what was going to be left, it might be 30 million of money that's come from the executive, and the pathway for that, because it's ring fence, would be going back to the centre to be reallocated in a monitoring round, which I suspect is going to be January, to be honest, unless they sort of squeeze something in very unusually in December. But I would be very keen that we find out maybe a little bit more detail around the figures, and also be very keen that DFI get that money back. It came from DFI, albeit as ring fenced. There's a lot of road maintenance stuff could be done with that money, and I'm sure it could be put to other uses as well. So perhaps we could ask something around that.
Just to clarify for members, so we can write. There was a briefing on they said to provide more information on active travel spend.
Yep.
Wanted to write to the OF around whether there's a monitoring round.
Yep.
We might get an answer before we get an answer, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
And then we wanted some comparison of confirmation that will be multi-year budgets to write to DOF.
Yep.
I think that's an executive decision, but we can write to them anyway. Comparisons between 24-25 and 25-26.
Yep.
Just on the A5, we did write to the department to ask what's going to happen with that money. On the back of the Committee for Finance writing to us, it's whether members want to write again on something that's very similar.
We haven't received a response back. Did you say?
Not yet.
Well, let's wait on. Okay. Let's wait on them coming back. It's an ongoing issue, but it's a very important one in terms of the amount of money that is contingent within that decision.
So the only thing remaining is whether members want to write around the detail of the A5 money, how much of that has been spent, and how much of that comes from the Shared Island Fund.
Yep. Remember, I certainly think that would be worthwhile, unless any members have other opinions.
It'd be good to get clarity on that.
Happy to find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only two other things I raised, and again, I'm happy to write in my own right because I don't want to give Mike on the team any more work. I asked two things. That was around the value of the vested land and what seems to be a snail's pace process for commercialising that into revenue, and what the value of that is. That would be really useful to get. I haven't really managed to make any progress in that. The second thing that I asked was regarding what efficiency savings either the Minister or the Permanent Secretary has directed upon their directorates to make in-house. It's all well and good asking arm's length bodies to find in-house saving if you're not doing that yourself. And it may well have been done, and that wouldn't be me being disparaging in any way, but as a scrutiny committee, it would be nice to know what attempts are being made internally to ensure work isn't being duplicated, that teams can work effectively and efficiencies can be made.
I know some departments do exactly that. I'm content with both of those, unless members have any other opinions. You're happy to write out as a committee and ask for those? Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Well, look, we have 42 minutes before the next committee's due in here. This is a
tea and coffee.
I know they will, Michael. I can feel the tenseness, the bracing in the clerk's shoulders here beside me as we move inexorably towards 1:30 and further on. Well, I'd love to throw a spanner into the education chair's works, but I think we're probably going to get through all this in reasonable time. That will. I think we've sorted out. That was item 9, which will take us on to item 10, which is the end of session report 24/25, and the consideration of draft report. I would take members to page 212. And inform members that, as agreed by the chairperson's liaison group, committee staff have prepared a draft end of session report containing key outputs and approaches to the committee's work for last year. Members are asked if they consider the contents of the report to be reasonable and to raise any matters where they wish to propose any amendment to text as drafted under the relevant page or section. So I had to look through this myself, and it was a very interesting report. I haven't been around for any of it. Some members might have been. Do you have anything that you wish to change, especially long-standing members of the committee?
Not something I don't want to change as such, but again, it's just to comment on it, if that makes sense.
No, you can comment away.
There's just noticed that there is a the section there on committee motions, and there haven't been any. If that makes sense. Again, I'm not sure. Again, it's just to say that there's a gap there. Obviously, again, I've been here longer in the committee than you, Chair, but not been around committees for terribly long. At the same time, I'm just, again, it's more of an observation than a comment, but certainly, if that, I'm not sure what we can do, but it would be good to maybe get some tangible out of the committee at some stage, especially given the context of we had NI Water here. There's obviously a lot going on,
I think there's look, I did see that. I'm also conscious, I think that the committee didn't do an inquiry last year. So both of those things are open. I think, and this isn't what you're saying, Andrew, by any stretch of imagination. I think having a committee motion for the sort of sake of a committee motion, there's not a lot of point to. But I equally think that actually, and it's up to us as a committee to sort of bring ideas for these forward. There are any number of pressures that both the department itself, the arm's length bodies, and Northern Ireland faces as a result of innumerable things that have happened over the last year. So it's maybe something that if members were happy enough, we could have a chat about in closed session at some point, just to hear what the ideas around it are. Would that?
Yeah, no contention.
Michael?
Is the planning session next week, which would be the ideal opportunity?
Absolutely.
That's not had in mind.
Seamless. No, that's absolutely fine. With the exception of that, any members want to oppose or amend any text? Nope. Okay, so then I need to seek committee agreement on the title, powers and membership of the report as set out in pages 212 to 216 of members' packs. I also will keep going here. Want to seek agreement on the key activities and statistical information as set out in pages 217 to 235 of the members' packs. Can I get a committee agreement on both of those? Yep. Therefore, I'll advise members that the draft version of the report will be subject to final proofing, formatting and accessibility checks prior to being published on the committee webpage. And I just need then to seek the committee's agreements to the contents of the report and publish it on the committee's webpage, subject to updating the committee membership. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Okay, item 11 is the raise, and we're now on page 237 for people who are following. This is the raise pack on SUDS. And I'll ask in the first instance if anyone has any comments to make on the SUDS paper. I thought it was very useful. I think this will be a key component. Obviously, it was discussed today with Northern Ireland Water of the bill, but it's as much for members' knowledge, and at some point we can, and I'm sure we probably will, maybe have raised back in for an all session where we can do some Q&A in the future. But if no one has any direct comments to make,
all right, Chair, just one.
Go ahead.
I know we're conscious of time, but
no,
Stephen made it a valid point again to them during the committee. It's all well and good, but if we end up having 11 different approaches from 11 different planning authorities,
I think Stephen made that point. Yeah,
and we've constantly made that. We still have, I understand, 6 out of the 11 councils that don't even have their area plans developed, even though they were due in 2019. So I don't know how we go about getting an understanding from them about how they're going to embrace the approach and ensure that the benefits are maximised. It's more of a comment than a question, because you can't answer it.
I'm glad you're not the right answer, because I don't have an answer to it, but no, it's a relevant comment. Justin?
Yeah, just further that point, in relation to roads design, roads must conform to the design manual for roads and bridges, and any departures must be dealt with. Surely it should be the same for SUDS. What's the overarching guidance on SUDS? which goes beyond local councils' area plans.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's big questions around SUDs. I think we'll continue to take evidence around it. I think it has obviously implications for the bill and whether we see what is currently before us as reasonable and effective legislation, or whether or not we want to amend it. But I think the first place is to go to the department and say, if we have any issues around it, especially around, what will the SUDS authority look like and all that sort of stuff. I think we will get into that sort of territory, but I'm very conscious that's an important aspect of it.
Just to follow up, just to totally concur, but again, it does show, let's talk about the Scottish and the Welsh, limited financial, per interagency, unclear ownership, they're writings on the wall. Nothing's new under the sun here, like, you know what I mean? You nearly know where we're going. Yeah. And it's just to highlight that, yeah.
I think there's a lot of learning from other areas that have already done something like this. Now, I'm also cognizant of the fact that when we compare Northern Ireland to England, their local authority planning, it's really, really different. And Scotland's the same in terms of how it does some of this stuff. So it's not really apples and apples. But I think, as you made the point very well there, Andrew, I think there's really good learning. It would be criminal if we didn't look at that, and if we need to tease that out in the first instance with the department to say how are you going to manage this, how are you going to learn lessons, at least in the first instance. So I'm sure we will do that. Can I seek committee's agreement to publish the research on the committee's webpage under the relevant section for the water, sustainable drainage and flood management bill? Our committee agreed. Okay. Justin, sorry.
One element is, an all-island approach on SUDS surely makes sense.
Well, I mean, it depends. Again, I'm more than happy to take best evidence from anywhere, whether that be the Republic of Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, GB. It doesn't matter. I think the key thing here is we get really effective legislation. I certainly don't care where the learning comes from, as long as we embed that learning in the process going forward. So I think everyone was agreed to 11 there. Justin, you didn't have any issues with that? No, fine, okay. Right. That takes us to item 12, which is SR 2025/154, the U324 Canning Road, Dougherty Stopping Up Order, Northern Ireland 2025. It's on pages 254 to 262. Documents in relation to the statutory rule, and it is subject to negative resolution. The purpose of this rule is to stop at the length of Canning Road, Dougherty. The rule will come into operation on the 31st of October. The examiner of statutory rules has reported on the rule and has had no comment to make. The committee considered the proposal for this SR at its meeting on the 10th of September. And was content with the proposal, but agreed to write to the department to ask for some clarity on an issue identified by the committee on its interaction with objectors. Members will recall that the committee wrote to the department since, in this case, one of the objectors in this case has indicated that they felt uncomfortable with a number of occasions they considered they were asked to withdraw their objection. The committee sought clarity on the wider process to ascertain whether objectors are routinely asked to withdraw their objection or whether they wish to consider withdrawing it. The department's response provides a clarity sought by the committee and confirms that when corresponding objectors are simply asked whether they want or they wish to consider withdrawing, and it's a matter for the objector. And a copy of the department's response is at page 261. I'll pause there for a second. I've had a look at that. I think I am content that the department obviously clarified that actually until you withdraw your objection, it is still an objection. That was clarified in the correspondence. But at this point, I am content with the department's response. I have to ask, because I was the one raising this, because essentially this is the third time this has appeared, and I was simply not going to let this go any further until we got some departmental response. I'm content with what we've got, unless anyone has any other issues around it. Okay, I can then ask, are members content with the statutory rule?
Content.
The Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2025/154, the U324 Canning Road, Dougherty Stopping Up Order, Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objection to the rule. Item 13 is the Forward Work Programme, and this is found at page 264. The department has offered a preliminary briefing on the public consultation on the SUDS in New Housing Developments Policy, so that members can have any early questions addressed. That's just for your information. Does anyone have any comments to make on the Forward Work Programme at this point?
Seek agreement to schedule that briefing.
And I do need agreement to schedule said briefing. Are members agreed to schedule a SUDS briefing?
Intent.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments to make on the Forward Work Plan, or any adjustments they wish to advise? Filling up nicely. I think it will be useful at our planning session. We'll be able to get into this in a little bit more detail. But our members agreed to continue with it as is.
Done, Chair.
Okay, that's item 13 done. Item 14 is any other business. Do members have any AOB that they wish to raise? Nope. Okay. And that takes us to item 15, which is date, time, location of next meeting. Are the committee agreed for the next meeting to take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of October in room 29, Parliament Buildings? The meeting is adjourned.